27th of February 2013. Are there any apologies? Right.
Apologies from Councillor Dempster. And Councillor Dick will join.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest? Oh, steady on. Councillor Hislop.
Item 11. In the past, prior to actually coming to fruition, I have supported the concept, so I'll be leaving the meeting on that one.
Councillor Gilroy.
It's also on item 11. I sat on the very small committee that chose the design for this, so I have publicly declared my support, which so I think I would have to leave.
Councillor Blake.
Item 4, a previous involvement prior to my planning committee days.
Okay. Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Chair. Item 4 again. I didn't attend the site visit, and I think I was here for the initial part of that, because I had asked at the time, could we not actually put in the papers the councillors who actually sat in the first part and therefore able to go all the way through, rather than have to ask us every single time.
I'll get the clerk to read out who's not eligible to participate in item 4.
Councillors not eligible to vote on item 4 are Blake, Dick.
Councillor Dryburgh.
Thanks, Chair. This is advice on item number 9. This is a house that had funding from the Community Covenant grant scheme for this particular application, and we were on the, certainly I was on the Armed Forces working group when that was taken forward. So I just want advice whether I can discuss this or not.
Councillor, decisions made on other bodies of the council are not directly relevant unless you've expressed a view. You feel that.
In which case I'll remove myself when this item comes up.
Any other declarations of interest? Everybody happy? Okay. Clerk, could you outline the procedures, please?
The Planning Applications Committee will consider each application in turn as detailed on the agenda. The case officer, area planning manager or other appointed officer will make a short statement addressing the determining issues accompanied by digital images. Any late information, amendments or corrections will be reported at this time. Members may ask questions of officers following the presentation on points of clarification. For those applications which are in accordance with the council policy subject to public speaking, the order of eligible parties being heard will be as follows: third parties objecting to an application, third parties supporting an application, statutory consultees objecting to an application, elected members of Dumfries and Galloway Council who are not members of the Planning Applications Committee. Such members should withdraw from the committee chamber after making a presentation, applicants or their agents. The chairman will individually invite those who have been registered in advance to speak in respect of the application to come forward, sit in the reserved seat after which they may be questioned by committee members. No questions may be asked of the members. When each presentation is completed, people should immediately return to their seats. After all the representations have been heard, the meeting is then in formal session and no members of the public may address the committee in public forum. The Planning Applications Committee will then determine the application, or if the application is a major development significantly contrary to the development plan or national development, be it recommended. The decision notice will be issued after a period of 40 days. The chairman has been provided with a list of eligible representatives who have been registered in the period of council policy. These individuals have all had their registration to speak confirmed and no other persons will be allowed to speak. Representatives have been placed in alphabetical order. A copy of the public list both committee officers. Representations on planning applications must be made on the basis of valid planning only. Certain matters not normally material planning consideration will not be council when planning. Representatives are encouraged to use the time allotted to clarify any points they consider material and address the determined issue. Representatives should not raise any new matters without explaining why they were not raised earlier with the case officer. Please do not repeat what is in the report, as members will have already read the report. Presentations will be strictly limited to 3 minutes per person, excepting national and major developments, where the time is 5 minutes. This should allow sufficient time for interested parties to make relevant points. The chairman of the committee will ask you to come to a conclusion if you take too long.
Thank you, Paula. Mr. Stutty.
Thank you, Chair. Just to inform members that item 5 on the agenda, which is Kenview Parton, the planning application was withdrawn yesterday, so it will not be considered today. We contacted all the relevant parties, so there shouldn't be anybody in the audience related to that application, but just in case anybody is, then item 5, Kenview Parton, is withdrawn and will not be considered today.
Okay. Item 3 on the agenda, minute of the meeting of the 30th of January 2013. Is that a true record of that meeting? Agreed, thank you. Item 4, Meikle Richorn, Dalbeattie, formation of access track, amended position to that approved under 09/P/2/0246 and 09/P/20247 at Meikle Richorn. Officer, we're in session. Paula?
As per the committee report, the site visit took place in April 2013. The site visit looked at the intended position of the track relative to the dwelling houses of Meikle Richorn, both from the proposed track position and from the houses that proposed track. The assembled parties were advised at the site visit that an appeal had been submitted and that the council had been notified by the Scottish Government's Department of Planning and Environmental Appeals that morning. At the time the report was submitted, that remained the case. It has now been confirmed that since then the appeal has been withdrawn. Communication has been made with all relevant third parties and members of the planning application. The appeal can therefore be determined by not the appeal, sorry, the application.
That's better. Planning officer, have you anything to add to what you've heard before? No. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're in session. Councillor Maitland, I can see you're revving yourself up there for...
Well, all I was going to, it's just really a remark at this stage that I found the site visit extremely helpful, really very useful. We've got to concentrate, I think, to be absolutely correct, we've got to concentrate on what's here in front of us now, not anything that's gone wrong in the past, allegedly, or anything like that. We've got to deal with what we saw on the ground. On that basis, Chairman, I am satisfied that the reasons for fall-in are not actually, don't stand as far as that I'm concerned. I am happy to go along with the recommendation.
Any other member? Any comment they wish to make? Councillor McKee.
Hi, it's just a comment, Chair. I think we've got to raise concerns about people anticipating the result of a planning application or an appeal, where this site, in this case, the track has almost been dug out before a decision was made by this committee. And it gives me concern that people are anticipating what they're going to get. And I don't know how we can let people know that the decision should be made before any disturbance to areas takes place. Recognise it puts us in a difficult position, but it's concerning that these things are happening.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it is always something that concerns us as officers as well. It constitutes a breach of planning control. It is something which we always advise anybody who is undertaking that it is entirely at their own risk and can clearly backfire if the committee decide to refuse, then they've got the potential of enforcement action having to unpick it. It isn't, however, a criminal prosecutable act to jump the gun. It's only if we've served an enforcement notice. So when an application is in, it has to go through due process and be determined first, but any works which are undertaken which are unauthorised are entirely at their own risks, and that was certainly passed on in this instance.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with both the comments made by Councillor Maitland and Councillor McKay, but on this application itself, which is a deviation from an original route, I can see no reason not to go with the recommendations.
Any other comments, ladies and gentlemen? Councillor McCaughty.
Yeah, I just agree with what's been said, but I think we better make sure that within the recommendation there's certain conditions attached, and in view of the fact the applicant's already cocked a snoot by starting before permission was granted, we make sure that our guys who enforce these conditions make sure that they are totally enforced. I know from time to time we're a wee bit lax in following up conditions, but I think in this case, let's make sure that applicant adheres to these conditions.
Okay. So are we agreed? Thank you. Paul?
The decision is to approve the application subject to the conditions set out in the officer's report.
Item 5 has been withdrawn. We move on to item 6, which is the erection of 14 wind turbines, maximum tip height of 126.5 metres, and formation of associated access tracks and hard standings, erection of one permanent wind monitoring mast, height of 80 metres, one temporary wind monitoring mast, height of 80 metres, substation and control buildings, formation of temporary construction compounds and offices, borrow pits, and concrete batching plant at Airies Farm, Glenluce. Mr. Barker, please.
Thank you. Right, there's some problems with the Thank you, Chair. You have in front of you a fairly comprehensive report outlining all the issues involved in this one. I think just before we start, the principal issues I'd like to draw to your attention are, the key issues, which are current policy, landscape and visual impacts, and impacts on cultural heritage. First of all, just to talk you through I think I work from the outside, working inwards, towards the centre of the site. I think that's probably the best way to approach this one. The site is indicated by the green star in the centre of the site there, in the centre of the plan. You can see it in relation to other wind farm proposals in the offing or those which are actually committed. You can see it's sort of fairly well in the heart of, or on the edge of the heart of, the cluster of interests. I've added a few extra pieces on the plan, since the plan was actually prepared by the applicants. They show just to the west of the sort of yellow-brown site in the middle are two sort of mauve-coloured, lilac-coloured blobs, which are the Sederunt application, which has been received just early in the new year, or sorry, just before Christmas. Also, just next to the green star is a second, or rather a third lilac blob. That's a scoping opinion which we've just issued for a site called Gas Farm, which is midway between the application site and Outfield Fell, which is the site in red, just to its west. and an application is expected on that one in May. And I've also indicated just to the north of the yellow-brown blob, which is the yellow-brown blob being Kilgallick, which the Scottish Office recently approved finally. Just to the north of that are two more lilac blobs, one being a site called Alta Cannock, which is just quite close to Bar Hill Station in South Ayrshire, and another one just to the east of that is called Corwar, which is just also in South Ayrshire. So just to recap, there's an awful lot happening in the area, and it's a constantly moving target. That's why the maps had to be updated since the applicant prepared it. The applicant having prepared it in good faith at the time. This is the application site itself. Essentially, it's largely forest plantation or former forest plantation. You'll see from the slides as we go through, there's been a lot of felling going on. The crossroads at the very bottom right of the slide is what's locally called the Durno Crossroads. The sort of road going southeast off the corner of the map being the road that goes down to the Cowan crossroads on the A75. The road leading into the site, you'll see, is actually a public highway. It's actually been largely abandoned because it doesn't actually lead anywhere habitable anymore, and the applicants intend to use that as the main access into the site. You'll see that there's the layouts in a largely fairly tight cluster in the centre of the forest area. The land actually slopes gradually uphill from sort of south to north, and that'll become apparent in the slides. The first viewpoint I'd like to look at is from Fell End. This is on the approach from Kirkcowan from the south, looking towards the site. You'll just see, just under the arrow there, the area of woodland concerned. You'll see from the following sketch, or the images rather. Probably quite hard to pick out at this sort of scale, but what the application involves is actually the hollowing out of a fairly extensive clearing within the forest, and that becomes, just go back to the previous slide, it's actually quite hard to pick out, but what you'll actually see is the reduction of the forest area going from east to west with the wind farm sat in it, which the next slide will show. But whilst this slide's up, I want to draw your attention to the wireframe at the bottom, which shows the emerging cluster of various wind farm proposals in the area. But to point out the fact that whilst there is this backcloth of general wind farm development, some of it being supported by the council, some not being supported by the council, i.e. the ones on the left side of the picture being the stragglers, the ones which have been largely allowed on appeal by the Scottish Office. The ones at the back are generally the heart of the cluster, which the IPP actually supports. But what the Airies proposal is actually bringing here is actually it's bringing that backcloth much further south, much more into the foreground, and you can tell that by the relative size of the turbines actually in the image. It doesn't actually show it very well there, but you can see that hollowed out clearing in the forest, which I was actually showing, and the turbines are actually superimposed on that. It's just it's a problem with graphics and trying to show these things on images. Again, for another key viewpoint from the south, from Knockfell, which is just south of the A75. You can see here that by comparing it down to the wireframe below, that Airies is actually extending this acknowledged cluster from the IPP. In a sort of, it actually increases the spread in the general sort of easterly direction when viewed from that point. And again, the image in this light doesn't actually show the turbines very well, but they are actually superimposed there. On the other approach from the site, from the southwest, from the Torwood Hotel site from Glenluce Village, this is the approach towards Taff Bridge. and the turbines actually from the site would actually appear over the tops of the trees in that particular view. Just turning left before Taft Bridge on the previous site, you'd sort of turn left towards Artfield Fell Wind Farm, do a quick sort of right over your shoulder, and that's the view again, looking towards Eldrig Fell and the sort of small summits there. Artfield Fell Wind Farm being just off the picture to the left, but essentially the turbines to the site would actually be so just breaking the skyline at that point there. The report you'll see refers to, it actually concentrates quite a lot on the impact on the 3 lots caravan park. Here, is a view taken from the south side of the public road that goes alongside 3 lots caravan park. The turbines would actually be visible over the trees at the back of the caravan park there. Loch Heron is actually just off the frame to the right. That's just a different view of the caravan site. Turbines again would be appearing over the trees at the background in the sort of centre point of the picture. Images prepared in the ES show a viewpoint further back, again with Loch Heron, with Loch Heron and the 3 lots caravan park on the far side of the loch. But you can see from the wireline image below the sort of relative impact that the turbines would actually have in relation to the 3 loch site. And that, believe it or not, is actually a montage, but the turbines aren't showing up in this light, unfortunately. Turning back to the northwest part of the site, the viewpoint I've chosen here is where the red triangle is. So these views are actually looking southeastwards, looking towards the existing forest edge. The track there is believe it or not, the public road. And that's as far as I could take the car on it before it sort of ran into big holes. But what I'm looking at there is the solid forest edge which exists at the moment, and the openness of Eldrick Moss, which at this point is extensive. And as you'll see from a few photos down the line, it actually extends a long way northwards and has Kilgalliot Wind Farm on the other side. Again, these are all these all show the existing sort of solid forest edge around the moss, which contains the moss, and this is where the public road just exits the forest. Thing I'd like to point out here is that what you've seen in the last few slides, is that solid forest edge, which I'll concentrate on. You'll see from the proposed forest development plan after the development has been built, should it be allowed, that what's really being proposed is a fairly open boundary there. So in effect, the development will be fairly open to the actual moss. This is a predicted view, just a little bit probably further up and beyond the viewpoint I was able to attain from the previous pictures. But you can see there where how the turbines actually stick out and how the clearing has actually been manufactured into the forest edge there. And that one, I think, quite clearly shows what I'm talking about. If you think at the moment, from the leftmost turbine to the rightmost turbine on the foreground is actually all current solid forest. The reason I'm sort of concentrating on this is because when we consider the Kilgallic application, and this is the view looking north, the Kilgallic development started life as a 132 turbine development with a tail of turbines extending over the foreground, over the open area, which we're now looking at. And it also showed a fair number of turbines actually just following the forest edge. Through negotiations with that applicant, we actually got them to take the turbines off the moss area and also to maintain this solid forest edge, so that turbines viewed from the moss area towards the forest would actually look sort of smaller as a result of the of them actually springing out of the treed area. But obviously, in the case that's being proposed now, you've essentially got the complete opposite, where the whole development would be opened out, and clearly the two principles would conflict. And again, this is from the elderly. This is looking north towards where Kilgallick has been allowed in the forest area, in the forested areas, with the current application site just behind the camera viewpoint. Looking at the inside of the interior of the site, again from from roughly the red triangle area. Again, it's a fairly, it's typical plantation forest. The green bits at the end are the sort of clearings within the forest. But as you can see, there's been an awful lot of felling. It's quite typical of forest plantation, and the cyclical, rotation of the forest. Again, all typical shots showing different stages of the forest management and forest evolution. Again, this is what the interior is like. That there is one of the borrow pits. Again, fairly well hidden within the interior of the site. This is the site access into the site. Probably, roughly around about the sort of red triangle which you saw. Again, it needs to be upgraded. On the western part of the site, again, typical views into the site. Again, this sort of fairly hollowed out clearing, which is evolving through forest felling. Something which we're used to. That's the Met mast that's up at the site, and turbines are to go around this general area. Again, access into the site, typical interior plantation forest type thing. And the other issue I'd like to draw to your attention is the fact that, and you'll see from the second reason for refusal, is the impact on a scheduled ancient monument, which is White Cairn, which is the hump, which you can see under the red arrow there, and it's proposed to site a turbine quite close to that, just on the down slope of it, and the impact on that is considered to be quite detrimental. That's just a closer view of the White Cairn itself. I think that's probably all I'd like to say at this moment in time. If there's anything else you need to know, please let me know, and I'll see if I can answer. Thank you.
Hope we didn't abuse that council car too much up that road. Any members, any questions for the officer at this point? Councillor Dick.
Yeah, just to ask in relation to the recommendations. Recommendation 2 refers to site turbine 13 and how it impacts on White Cairn. Could you expand on that a little, because it's not clear to me from the papers just exactly how that would in any way damage the White Cairn. What exactly would it do to it?
Yeah. In terms of physical damage, the answer is no damage at all. The main consideration with scheduled ancient monuments or other historic features tends to be the impact on their setting, and in this case, with a turbine of such modern, tall appearance, so close to, and we're talking in terms of about 100 meters or so. Proximity to a scheduled ancient monument, that proximity is considered to be too close, and it's felt that the setting of it will be detrimentally impacted accordingly.
Any other questions for the officer at this time? Councillor Hislop.
It's in the report. It says that between 80 and 100 metres would be considered acceptable. Surely in a land of giants, someone who's 5'10" and everybody else is 6'10", actually the 5'10" stands out. Why is it you feel that by bringing the height down wouldn't make them, the other ones catch your eye more? And the other thing is, if you have a turbine coming out of the forest, that would give me a sort of rough idea of what height the turbine was by aligning it with the tree, whereas if it didn't come out the tree, I wouldn't be able to sort of associate one height with another.
Yeah, the height issue is, I mean, I'm sort of calling on the experience of my landscape colleague, as an advisor, and what she feels is that, I mean, you'll see from the report there's a page there. It's around about 4.4. That's the part of the report. It actually lists all the various impacts of all the properties and locations within about 3 kilometres of the actual site boundary, and you'll see that all those impacts are generally either significant or moderate or substantial, which in ES terms is actually fairly significant. Generally, if you get those sort of impacts repeating, you would generally, as a developer, maybe try and do something about it. But here, it's just being left as if to say, well, here it is. Here's the challenge. Take it or leave it. But because these impacts are so, such a high category, and the receptors, whilst there's sort of, probably about 15, 20 there, they still have a right to be safeguarded. Just because there's a few of them doesn't mean to say that the impact is, on them isn't so great, or that, it doesn't matter. I think their interests have to be safeguarded, especially in the context of other developments going on around them. So in terms of actually that actual height reduction which is being proposed or suggested is actually felt to be quite critical, that if the turbines actually were reduced to that height, then a lot of those properties in that 3 kilometre cordon wouldn't actually see that the turbines, or see them to the extent that they're actually visible, or likely to be visible at the moment. So it would actually just sort of, put them down below the radar, and certainly the outer fringes of the forest would actually generally, hide them from view. Whereas at the moment, there's no tree on Earth, relative to distance that's actually going to hide the turbines at the moment, or shield the impact from them. I hope that helps.
Any other questions for Mr. Barker? At this point, no. Okay. We have one speaker on this application, Mr. Baker, Alan Baker, who's the agent. Mr. Baker, could you come forward, please, and someone will show you how to work the microphone. If you press the speak button, that's it. And you have 5 minutes, Mr. Baker.
Okay. Good morning, members of the Planning Committee. My name's Alan Baker. I'm Managing Director of 2020 Renewables, the developer of Airies Wind Farm, the application before you today. Before I deal with the issues presented in the report as grounds for refusing the application, I just want to be clear in a couple of things. Airies is a good wind farm site in a relatively remote location. The site is compliant with the Council's structure plan and interim planning policy. The entire site, not 3 turbines, all 14 turbines are in the area of search as defined by your interim planning policy. The Council's landscape officer accepts the principle that the development in this location is acceptable. The impacts are unlikely to be over-dominant in the wider setting, and agrees that the cumulative impacts are acceptable with other wind farm developments in the area. So there is no cumulative issues to do with this application. At paragraph 137 of your planning report, you will see a list of consented and potential projects. Almost half of these projects have not been submitted to planning. I believe that the project list has been included to suggest that there are cumulative issues with this landscape, cumulative issues with the landscape of Airies. That is not correct. Your landscape officer agrees that the cumulative issues are acceptable. So turning now to the grounds for suggesting refusal of this application, the Planning Committee report leads you down a path that would suggest the local impacts are unacceptable. From my 15 years of experience of developing onshore wind, I would like to give you a different viewpoint. Dealing first with the landscape issue, the landscape officer of the Council would have you believe that reducing the height of the turbines from 126.5 metres to 100 metres and replanting some of the forested area would significantly reduce the local impact. Reducing the height by 26 metres will not hide these turbines. The height of the application turbines is comparable with the other projects that have been consented recently. The proposed site is in a relatively remote area, within an area that the council agrees can accommodate large-scale wind farm development. There are 4 properties local to this application. The wind farm has generated little objection from local residents and is supported by Old Luce Community Council. My view is that the council's landscape officer has overstated the local impact. My experience of onshore wind farm development in Scotland and the whole of the UK is I have not seen a wind farm project that does not have some local impact. The majority of wind farms consented by this council have local impact. Turning now to the cairn, it is not a scheduled monument. It is not listed as national importance. Historic Scotland have not raised any objection. The reality of the White Cairn is it's currently hidden away and surrounded by commercial forestry. It is in very poor condition now. I believe that development of Airies Wind Farm will improve the setting and preserve the cairn. So in conclusion, the entire application is within an area of search under the interim planning guidance. We have followed that guidance. The cumulative impacts of the landscape are acceptable because we have designed the wind farm appropriate to the landscape. The White Cairn will continue to exist and the development of the site will see setting improved. There are no other planning or environmental objections to this application. Considering all of the facts before you today in relation to this application, is a refusal justified? If not, I would respectfully ask the Planning Committee to reconsider the planning report recommendation and approve the application today. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Any questions for Mr. Baker? Councillor McKee.
Thanks, Chair. Mr. Baker, there's 250 operational or committed or approved turbines in this area. Now, you're saying that it's within the council area of SERPS. Do you see an area of SERPS as being maximised by the maximum number of turbines you can safely put in that area? Or do you have a different view from that?
I think you've got to look at the whole area as a whole, and when these areas are put together, your whole council boundary area is assessed. I'm not saying that that entire area should be filled with turbines. You've got to design the site properly so that it fits into that landscape, and I believe we have done that.
Councillor Maitland.
Question's been partly asked, but want to go on to ask about the landscape architect, in essence, objects, and so I'm just interested, Mr. Baker, that you say that there would be no cumulative issues. And I'm quoting you. There is no cumulative issues, is what you just said. But the landscape architect quite clearly says that there are cumulative effects. So I'm just surprised.
I've read the entire landscape report. What I quoted to you is straight out of that report. She says that it can be accommodated in that landscape. I think the objection that I read from the report is the local issue, not the cumulative issue. And the other thing I would add is that S&H on cumulative issues have not objected to this application. They have not even asked for turbines.
You wish to come back, Councillor?
Yes, if you wouldn't mind. I then want to go on to ask about there was suggestion that it could be mitigated, but I don't see mitigation in response to the requests by the architect here. So again, I wonder what the reason behind that was.
Okay, the process that we go through in relation to this application probably started 18 months, 2 years ago. As part of that application, we did a scoping exercise which indicated 20 turbines. We deleted 6 of those turbines and made the application 14. The design reviews that your landscape architect is talking about, we were notified just before Christmas of those changes. And our landscape architect, who's here today, rebutted that because we believe that we have designed this project appropriately for that landscape. And the comfort we get from that is that SNH do not object on cumulative issues. It is in an area of search. And I think the issue of dealing with the height is there is 3 or 4 local properties here. One is the caravan park, which was put up in the slides, but actually all the caravans face to the south, so they will not get a view of these turbines. So I think there's a balance here to be brought as to whether it is having an impact. Reducing it to 100 metres will make no difference at all, and it will probably look out of character with everything else that's been presented.
Councillor McComb.
Thank you, Chair. I would dispute Mr Baker's claim that there is no cumulative issue here. You've got 250 operational or committed turbines in the locality. That, to me, looks very much like a cumulative issue. Secondly, I would agree with what Mr Baker says about reducing the height. Reducing the height from 10 times the height of the trees to 8 times the height of the trees is not going to hide the turbines.
Do you wish to comment?
I think the only thing I would say on the cumulative issue is that we have very carefully looked at the other applications that have been given consent and what is in the system. I believe the design we've put forward for areas can be accommodated in that landscape, and your landscape architect confirms that. So I'm not saying you won't see other turbines, you will. I believe there is a capacity issue, and the capacity in that particular landscape view is accommodated basically by these 14 turbines.
Councillor Driver.
Thanks, Chair. I'm looking at page 55 of 202. If you've got the report, Mr Baker. At 2.8, Historic Scotland raises no formal objections but raises significant concerns that the ES has not been adequately assessed with potential direct and indirect impacts of the development of key historic environmental features. From information provided in line with the finding in the ES, it appears that proposals would have a significant impact on landscape setting in a small number of SAMs, although the impacts have been underscored in the environmental impact assessment, and some of the methodology used is questionable. Yet you say you've went through a process of consultation and you know, a large amount of surveys and things like that. And yet ES here, I should say Historic Scotland here, say that there is some questionable issues in there. I just wonder what your response would be to that.
We have gone through a proper assessment here. If it was a listed monument, then we would deal with it in a slightly different way. We have put the appropriate set-off distances. At this moment in time, it is an extremely poor quality cairn. It really is. And I honestly believe that developing the site will open that area up and improve the setting of the cairn.
Any other questions, members, for Mr Baker? Mr Duncan?
Chair, if I may, with your permission, just clarify an issue with regard to cumulative impact. Council Landscape Architect's comments are in the report relative to cumulative impact. I would refer to members at 2.2.2b. That mentions cumulative impact, and at 2.2.10 there's a section on cumulative impact. So it's just to clarify, for the avoidance of doubt, what the Council's Landscape Architect's views were in cumulative impact. That's all.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just pick up a point that Mr Baker raised, and I'm sorry if I've misled anybody, and I apologise. Mr. Baker correctly pointed out that White Cairn is not a scheduled ancient monument, but you'll see from the report that, in effect, it's as important as a scheduled ancient monument, and it's effectively one that missed, that was missed when the last designation round was undertaken, and in fact, it's of a quality that is schedulable. So it's one that could well be scheduled. Should Historic Scotland be minded to do an update of its record? Thank you.
Councillor McKee, is this a question for Mr. Baker?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure whether it's for Mr. Baker or whether the officers would address it.
Yeah, Councillor Geddes.
Forgive me, David. I think that Mr. Baker should be given the opportunity to respond to the comments that have already been made before anyone else is brought in. I think we've got to do this appropriately in accordance with principles of natural justice.
He is going to get the opportunity. I'll come back to you, David. Mr. Baker, do you wish to comment on respond to the comments that the officers made?
The only thing I would say is that Janet Swales produced a 30-page report on this application, and it is quite clear in that report that she finds the cumulative issues acceptable.
Councillor McKee.
Chair, maybe seek clarification as to whether the representative should talk about Forestry Commission objection, or should that come to the officer?
Well, basically at the moment you're hearing representations, so if there's any questions to go to Mr. Baker, that's really the opportunity to do so now, and then I would suggest you go into session. Any clarification from officers can be given at that stage.
So your question for Mr. Baker?
I was asking who would be the most appropriate, but that's Mr. Baker. What's your views on the Forestry Commission objection, Mr. Baker, please?
Where there is compensation planting, they object to every project in Scotland. We need to do a commercial agreement with them. I don't believe it is a planning or environmental issue associated with this. We will sign a commercial agreement if we get consent for this wind farm.
Any other questions of Mr. Baker? No. Okay, Mr. Baker, you can take your seat. Thank you very much. We're in session, ladies and gentlemen. Councillor Maitland.
Could I just ask, I want clarification. The applicant has quite clearly said, and he's absolutely right, that SNH have not objected, and yet SNH have made objecting sort of noises, how I describe it. And I would just like officers to advise me, really, a thumbnail sketch of the process that SNH appears to have used in the past. I mean, I know it's mysterious, but I find it very strange that there is no objection, and yet if you actually read what they've said, they're talking about cumulative effect and the visual effect upon Loch Heron, and given the effect that Kilgalliath will have, which we now know has gone through, even small effects, such as that of the Airies scheme, will add to the general wind farm influence upon this long-distance route at this location. So I have to say, I find the whole thing quite confusing. I'd be grateful for some assistance.
I'll let my colleagues give a more detailed response, but just to reiterate, the national policy of SNH now is not to object to wind farms unless they are affecting national designation. So if you see concern from SNH, that is very often akin to an objection by any other word, because they will not object to something in Dumfries and Galloway unless it was, say, within the national scenic area, or they felt it was cumulatively becoming a national issue. But I'll let my colleagues address the more detailed issues. No? No comment? No? Okay.
Any other? Councillor McKee.
Thanks, Chair. I think Historic Scotland, what's concerning me is 28D, the top of page 56. However, as surrounding committed wind farms have already compromised the setting of Wood Cairn to some degree, the only mitigation possible appears disproportionate, hence the reason on balance not to formally object. We're going to have to work out when is a site fully committed and when is it not fully committed. Because we're talking about what 250 turbines in that area. When's enough? Right, we need to have obviously today's not the place to have a discussion on this, but we need to try and talk these things out to be reasonably fair to wind farms, the people that like to put these turbines up. I'll leave it with you, Chair.
Councillor Geddes.
Well, I would suggest, you know, in response to Councillor McKee's comment that, you know, when is enough is enough. I don't think we can ever say that, sir, because if you come out and say that, you know, enough is enough, you've taken up a predetermined position, in my view, in relation to any possible future such applications. And I think we've got to look at each individual application on its merits as we're doing today. I have concerns about, you know, the sort of apparent ambiguity of certain of the comments that we've got, and Councillor Maitland has already picked them up. And, you know, it's our decision as to whether or not we grant the application. But, you know, going back to the comment at the top of page 56, I think David mentioned, you know, talking about on balance, the phrase on balance is used, not to formally object. It's all sort of very vague, in my view, lacking in clarity. But then again, perhaps, you know, the world isn't really about black and white. It's all about different shades of grey. And I would suggest that on balance, you know, if other people can use the phrase on balance, I would adopt the same luxury. I would tend, on balance, to adopt the recommendation to refuse as set out in the report. I will not move to that effect at the moment because I'm interested, as I always am, to hear comments from, and perhaps even divergent views from other colleagues.
Councillor Dick.
Thanks, Chair. I think, having gone through this report, I'm a little surprised at the recommendation to refuse. Given the remoteness, the forestation roundabout, I would have suggested, certainly looking at it initially, that this would be an ideal setting for a proposal of this nature. And I think as far as the recommendations are concerned, I would suggest in relation to item 1 that given the location and its remoteness and the mitigation of visual impact by forestation, that it does not actually adversely affect visual amenity. In relation to item 2, I would accept that contrary to this recommendation, in fact actually does not damage the site of the White Cairn. And I think I would go as far at this point actually to move that planning permission is granted. If I could just say one thing before I finish, and I'll preface my remarks by saying that, of course, as always, every application is treated on its own merits. I do have some concerns, though, about the consistency. I know there's another application further on, and I'm not referring to it. I don't expect any answer to this remark, but it did give me some concerns going through this set of papers that there may be a consistency issue, and I'll just leave it at that.
Councillor Gilroy.
Thank you. I've been very interested in the debate we've been having, and I've been a great believer with wind farms that there's some places that are better for them than others, and I would suggest that this is an acceptable position for 14 turbines. So I'd be very happy. To this application.
Any other? Councillor Dryburgh.
Thanks, Chair. And obviously, it's really important to all have a good debate and understand exactly what the issues are. But I'm looking at section 4.4 on page 66 of the thing, and then you look at the landscape and visual impacts and design, and it goes right through from A to actually Z of some of the visual impacts it's actually going to cause within that particular area. the answers that I received from the question of the, I wasn't very happy with. The situation is, this has obviously went through some consultation. There are more than the required number of objectors as a major application at the end of the day. It would have came before us anyway. So therefore, I'm quite happy to propose that we go with the recommendations as is set out in the report.
Councillor Thompson.
I would second that.
Councillor Combe.
Thank you, Chair. I notice that neighbouring wind farms at Artfield and Balmurray are mentioned, and the approved wind farm at Carskra. These wind farms are approximately 45 metres lower than the one which is the subject of the present application. Considerable height reduction. Thank you.
Okay. No other comments? We have a motion and amendment. Paul?
With regard to the motion, especially Councillor Dick, if you're proposing to grant planning permission, can I suggest you consider delegating the application of conditions and a legal agreement if you do want to grant.
Forgive me, could you explain that, please?
Because the recommendation is refused, there are no conditions attached. If you were to grant, planning officers need to be delegated authority to draft up those conditions, and we would also normally seek a legal agreement for restoration, television interference, roads repair, or wind farm development as per the IPP.
Could I request an adjournment to consider that?
Councillor Geddes.
We did exactly that at the previous meeting, sir.
I wasn't. Yeah. I mean, yes, I'll grant. Along 10 minutes. It is 11:29. We'll reconvene at 11:40.
For the interval. And just in moving approval as an exception to the development plan, subject to section 75 planning obligation covering inter alia, 1, a restoration band, 2, roads repair, 3, sorry, I beg your pardon?
Bond it will be. Restoration bond.
Sorry, I thought that's what I'd said.
You said band.
My apologies. 2, roads repair. 3, conditions monitoring officer to be provided. 4, TV interference and accepting this list is not exclusive. Plus conditions to delegate to officers to produce, what should include conditions addressing the white cairn. Could I also say that in considering this, I would much rather it were council planning officers that are in control of conditions rather than if it goes to appeal a reporter. Thanks, Chair.
Are you happy with those conditions, Seconder?
Yes, quite happy to second that.
We have a motion proposed by Councillor Dick, seconded by Councillor Gilroy, to grant planning permission as an exception to the development plan, subject to a section 75 planning obligation, and to delegate to officers conditions to be attached. We have an amendment proposed by Councillor Dryborough, seconded by Councillor Thompson, to go with the recommendation in the report and refuse permission on the grounds as set out in the report. Chair.
Motion.
Vice Chair. Councillor Blake.
Motion.
Councillor Dick.
Motion.
Councillor Dryborough. Councillor Ferguson.
Motion.
Councillor Geddes. Councillor Gilroy. Councillor Hislop.
Motion.
Councillor Yin. Motion. Councillor McCottrey. Councillor McComb.
Amendment.
Councillor McKee. Councillor Maitland.
Amendment.
Councillor Ogilvie.
Amendment.
Councillor Thompson.
Amendment.
Councillor Tuckfield. I have 8 votes for the motion, 8 votes for the amendment. Would the chair like to have the casting vote?
Thanks for that, folks. I'm not one for doing U-turns, so I'll just vote the way I voted the first time. It's motion.
Motion. The motion is passed. The application is approved, subject to Section 75 and conditions.
Thank you. We move on to item 7, which is the erection of a dwelling house at land adjacent to Carrick Cottage Gatehouse of Fleet. Judith Turnbull, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. This is an application for planning permission in principle for the erection of a dwelling house at adjacent to Carrick Bay. The two main factors to consider in the assessment of this proposal, the first is the principle of the dwelling house and whether that's acceptable, and the other factor is the appropriateness of this particular site for the siting of the dwelling. This is a location plan. The application site is on the east side of Carrick Bay, and Carrick Bay is about 5 kilometres south of Gatehouse of Fleet. The site itself is within the Fleet Valley National Scenic Area. It's adjacent to an area of undeveloped coast. Basically, that runs up the coastline, and it's 500 metres from Triple SI, Carrick Ponds, which is just inland. This is a site plan. The application site is outlined in red. The site itself is at the junction of, or T-junction with tracks. The track that coming in from the bottom of the plan is coming from Knockbrecks and going out at the top where it says site plan. That's the track going back towards Sand Green. The buildings shown Gateside, Carrick, Ilcote, Byre and Lycan, which is just off the page. These mark the end of the development in this area. To the north, for about a kilometre, there are about 50 huts, chalets, basically wooden buildings that have been there for a long time, which I imagine started off as holiday accommodation. They're all individually owned, privately owned, and they've been there, they've been there for quite a long time. You can see the extent of them better if you look at the map, application plan in the committee papers. This is a view just looking across the junction towards the application site, looking south. You can see Carrick Bay, and the application site is beyond the dike. There's a kind of shed, potting shed at the moment, and a caravan that you can just see the top of the roof. This is taken looking in the other direction, across the bay. You can start to see the chalets, the other chalets. The site itself is on the far side of the track, on the far side of the dike, just in among the caravan. And if you look just at the roof of the caravan, you can see the start of the beach. This is just taken further along the track, looking into the site, and across the site you can see the extent of the beach. And this is taken from the other side of the bay, looking back
towards the site. The site is between the main two properties you can see, and that's the caravan roof that you can see. The justification given for the need for a dwelling house at this location is that the applicant plays a key role in the successful operation of the chalet park, and in order to do so, it's necessary for her to live on site. The applicant operates a caretaking management agency for 18 of the 50 chalets at Carrick, and details of the services offered and those selected are given in paragraphs 43, 44 and 45 of my report. On consideration of the information submitted in respect of the justification, it's not considered that a compelling argument has been put forward to demonstrate that a dwelling house at this location is essential. With regard to the application site, the erection of a dwelling house, however modest, would be highly visible from Carrick Bay and would have a significant impact on the setting of the bay, the wild landscape in the locality. In conclusion, the application is recommended for refusal for the reasons I've detailed and given in the report.
Thank you, Judith. Any questions for the officer at this stage? Members? No? Okay, we have 3 speakers. First one is Mr. Broom. Could Mr. Broom come forward, please? And somebody will switch on the microphone for you, sir. And Mr. Broom, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
My wife and I have owned a chalet at Carrick for over 20 years. I do not have any business or financial connection with Mrs. Tennant. During the winter period, Carrick is virtually deserted except for the Christmas and New Year period. At this time of the year, it is most likely that we will be receiving end of some severe weather. In the past, there have been burst pipes, roof damage, broken windows, TV aerials blown down. When Mrs. Tennant was resident at Alcote Buyer, she would daily walk her dogs around the site, and if she found any damage, she would inform the chalet owners so repairs could be made before any further damage was done. This was done completely voluntary, irrespective of whether she had any connection with the chalet or not. On one occasion, she and her husband made a temporary repair to a badly damaged chalet roof, the very roof of one of the objectors. I was a police officer for 26 years, and some of that time I was involved in crime prevention. Due to the isolated area being deserted in winter, it's highly vulnerable to theft and burglary, although thankfully so far we've been very lucky, with only a few incidents with a boat going missing, logs and gas cylinders stolen. But it will only be a matter of time before this takes place. To have someone living so close would act as a deterrent. Although Mrs. Tennant no longer lives at Alcote Buyer, she is still a regular visitor, and certain law enforcement agencies have contacted her. It is believed that smuggling and illegal cockling activities are taking place in and around Carrick. It's well known the fact that certain members of the Carrick Residents Committee, both past and present, are keen for Mrs. Tennant not to be present at Carrick. Malicious rumours have been circulated. One was an untrue complaint made to the council, which resulted in action being taken. She has had damage done to her property and her computer has been hacked. It's not all that long ago that I spoke to the chairman on the matter, and I was amazed when he informed me that he did not want locals coming to Carrick. He wanted it for residents alone. I informed him and was disgusted with his attitude, but this train of thought still seems to persist. The objectors to this planning show scant regard to the truth. In fact, slanderous objections were made. The stick shed doesn't even have drainage, so the Chinese laundry is kicked into touch. No one has ever lived in the caravan, and there are 2 roads into Carrick, not 1.
You have 30 seconds, Mr. Broom.
The rules of Carrick Residents Association do not apply outside the boundaries, and at the last AGM, only 50% attended. Only 15 of the owners of the chalets objected. An objector stated that the matter should be debated at the AGM. However, at the AGM of the 7th of April 2012, the matter was not even brought up. We members only received an email from the committee telling us how to object to the planning. Not a very democratic way to go about things. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for Mr Broom? Councillor Heslop.
Mr. Broom, clarify a point, I might have picked you up wrong. Did you say that the applicant used to stay at Owlcote Byre?
She used to live at Owlcote Byre prior to a divorce.
Any other questions at this for Mr Broom? No? Okay. Thank you very much, Mr Broom. You can take your seat. Anne Chaudhry, please. And you, somebody else switch it up. If you press the speak button somewhere, one,
Right.
that's you.
Okay.
You have 3 minutes.
Good morning, everybody. I'm not as well prepared. I've just come back from holiday, but I would like to put forward some points on this. I have the pleasure of living and running a business in Kirkcudbright, but I also have the great privilege of owning a chalet at Carrick. I'm speaking here as an individual, not a member of any association, and I like to think with a reasonably long track record of what this region's about. I've been involved in tourism for many, many years. I recognise some people around this table. And I'm still local chairman, the regional chairman of the Prince's Scottish Youth Business Trust, which starts up small businesses. For that reason, I'm particularly interested in helping and maintaining any living in our countryside. I do not know this applicant any better than any of the other people at Carrick, but I feel that the difference in this application is it's not for another holiday home. I've no objection to people having holiday homes. They provide a huge part of our income to this region. But this person has made a serious contribution to looking after, looking out for, and being around at Carrick. And believe me, in a remote part of the country like that, it's worth a lot, especially at times when people are tending to leave the countryside rather than stay in it. If you know that site, it actually impinges on nobody's view. No one could claim it. It's a matter of principle to some people that they want to place a time warp on Carrick. That's fine, but we have to live as a region here as well. I think that while we are aware of looking after all the interest in this, and it may be contentious, I do think that this lady deserves the right to stay where she would like to make a contribution to our economy in that area. And I understand why people might object to it, but as someone who knows the area very well, it's not something, it's a small site, it can only have a limited impact anyway, and I would have thought only favourable. I, for one, quite welcome the thought that someone will be permanently, or could be permanently in residence on that shoreline. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Hislop.
Mrs. Chaudhry, if you're looking at this, if I was to build that house and decided that I was going to run this service, how would you guarantee that I was still there after 6 months when I might have sold it on, and therefore you've got a house, but you don't have the service because someone else comes in and actually buys property and uses it as a holiday home, so you haven't achieved what you would like?
I don't think you can ever guarantee that, and it's not for me to say on that basis. All I know is that for many years this applicant has made a contribution in that area. I like to think that the planners would be able to ensure they're perfectly able to put the conditions on it that are required to ensure that it fits in with the general area. I think the issue is, do we want to encourage someone who very clearly wants to be able to continue to do what she has been doing? She's been a loyal person at Carrick for many, many years, and it's really not going to impinge on anyone. There are houses on either side of that site, and it's a very limited site. It would not be able to, it could not be overdeveloped, let me put it that way. There are plenty of people who do things at Carrick that one might not like in terms of letting I don't want to go there. So I don't think it's fair to actually try and foresee what might happen to this site.
Any other questions for Mr. Georgie? No. Okay, you can take your seat. Thank you very much. We now have Sue Hudson, agent for the applicant. Sue, you have 3 minutes.
Good morning, everyone. Before you start the clock, may I just answer a question from Councillor Hislop beforehand? How we would control the use of the house? If I can answer the question you asked the supporter.
It may be more advantageous if you do your presentation. I might ask you the same question later on, and then you don't have the clock running against you.
Okay, set the clock then.
I haven't started it yet, but I'm about to.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Sue Hudson, agent for Cathy Tennant, who's also here to answer any questions you have. There are 2 reasons for refusal in the officer's report. They deal with 1, the need for a house in the countryside in terms of policy D4, and 2, the visual impacts of the building on the site, particularly on the national scenic area. To start with the visual amenity issue, this is an outline application. Details have not yet been submitted. The Planning Authority have therefore absolute control over what this house will look like and can ensure it is of the correct scale, design and finish to complement its setting and landscape. The site, as you'll see from the plan on page 79 of your report, is part of a group of 3 houses marking the entrance to Carrick Shore. I would contest the claim that a house here would be highly visible from Carrick Bay. A modest house on this site would not be prominent. From the shore, only the roofs, as you've seen, of the 2 existing houses flanking the site are visible. Policy EU1, quoted in the reason for refusal, refers to the national scenic area, but it is only relevant if the development in question has a significant impact on the NSA. The site is part of a well-established group of buildings consisting of at least 50 large wooden chalets, outbuildings, 3 substantial stone cottages. The addition of a 4th small cottage between the 2 existing houses would not by any stretch of the imagination have a significant impact on the NSA. Additionally, Carrick area may be attractive, but it is a settled area and not wild, as stated in the report. For example, as the Merrick and the Galloway Park are wild. Turning to the essential need required by the policy, Cathy has for many years lived at Alcote in Carrick and acted on behalf of the residents there, gradually taking on more responsibility for the chalets, until many residents now regard her services as vital. Unfortunately, personal circumstances have resulted in her having to move out of Alcote into temporary accommodation elsewhere. This has been less than ideal, requiring Cathy to drive to the chalet park often late at night down a narrow muddy track to greet new arrivals. A large number of chalet owners welcome the security that a permanent resident would bring to the site, particularly in the winter months when chalets are empty, when burst pipes might cause untold damage if left unchecked. There were 18 owners who wrote in support of the application and who have demonstrated that support by entering a formal agreement with the applicant to look after their chalet to some degree. Those agreements were also letters of support. In summary, the need for the proposed house is justified. A subsequent application would ensure the planning authority controls the appearance of the house. The site is between 2 existing houses. It's in a small group adjacent to 50 chalets on the park. This is not an isolated house in the countryside and most certainly would not have a significant impact on the NSA. I urge members to accept the on-balance justification for this house, to approve it subject to conditions requiring design details to be submitted, a landscape scheme and a Great Crested Newt survey. And a Section 75 agreement would also ensure that the use was kept appropriate to the house.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Hislop.
Usually when we have need for houses being asked for, there is a way that you can tie the actual house and business to what it's for. How do you plan to actually tie this house to the business, which is caretaking the 40 odd, 50 odd chalets? How do you actually tie that together in Section 75? Because then you'd have to get the permission of the owners of the other properties to agree to that. And if it was to go ahead, would you be willing to accept the condition that it was for someone who ran that business?
To answer part of that, yes, we would be certainly willing to accept a condition, an occupancy condition. Perhaps Mr. Stutt would be more qualified to actually advise you on whether condition or an obligation would be more appropriate in this circumstance, but either would be acceptable to the applicant.
Councillor Thompson.
Mrs. Hudson, you stated earlier that the applicant lived in or around the site some time ago. How long ago is it that she moved out?
I'll just ask Kathy if she'll answer that herself, if you don't mind. I moved out just when I had to.
Thank you for that.
Any other questions for the agent? And Councillor McKee.
You're using an argument that you provide a service in that area. Is this a new service that you're providing, or was it provided before?
A bit like Topsy, when I first moved there in 02, came to me because I was permanently there, and it's grown with that over the time. The service I offer now, I have been doing it as my main business for the last 8 years, and I intend to do it until I'm no longer able to, in which time my daughter will take over from me.
Councillor Maitland.
I'm just going to ask, what's the business called? You got a name?
I've never given it a name. I've never been so formal. I suppose it's just my own name.
Any other questions for Councillor Ogilvie?
Yes, a lot of premise has been made on, for turning over this, on the business need and the business requirement, but there's no evidence here to say that it's a business. It's a collection of, I mean, it's not a holiday park, it's not a collection of chalets. It's just, you have maybe a personal contract with individuals, so it's not a business as such, it's a personal arrangement. Sorry, that's my question. You know, is it a holiday park? Is it recognised as a group of chalets that is a business, or is it just an individual contract that you have with each owner?
The situation at Carrick is very different from a normal chalet park, as was explained to you by the officer. Each of the chalets is independently and individually owned. Therefore, it's not possible to have a contract to cover the whole chalet park. Contract is with each an individual owner, and that's where business is built up, individual contract.
Okay, Councillor Ferguson.
So just to clarify, I'm assuming what you're describing is like a factoring service you have. Is that a fair description?
Yes,
and,
I think.
Yeah, and just on the back of that you're a sole trader.
Yes.
So you're no requirement to have a company name as such. You trade under your own name.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? No, thank you very much. You can both take your seats. No further speakers, so we're in session, ladies and gentlemen. Councillor Thompson.
I think the key issue here is, in fact, whether a building of this nature is essential. And my own view is that, based on the fact that the applicant actually has carried out these duties over the last few years, couple of years, that that has not been demonstrated. In other words, like, you know, the business could be run from a remote location. And my own view is that we should follow the recommendations. I'm not going to put forward a motion at this stage because I'd like to hear the views of others.
Councillor Hislop and then Councillor Dick.
It's a couple of points of clarification. If we were to approve this, what would we actually tie it to? because you have 50 individual properties there, whereby today, the person who owns it uses it as a holiday home. Tomorrow, the next person moves in on a permanent basis. So I don't see why a house should be tied to that 50 things. You could end up with nobody actually having holiday homes, but all residential properties down there. No need for this house. And if we were to approve it, could we put a condition on that it's only for a caretaker for those houses? And I would find it difficult to tie those together, but just clarification if there was a possibility.
Chair, that's actually hit the nail on the head. That is exactly the problem. If you had a caravan park that was all provided, a single caravan park where you had a single caretaker, there would probably be a justification you could make for an essential need for a house there to provide that. The difficulty here is exactly what you've said. How would you actually tie it? Because there's no binding tie on any of these property owners to use the applicant's services. And I would find it very difficult to actually produce or justify even a Section 75 legal agreement that binded it, because what are you actually binding it to? And that's the problem that we've had with it.
Yeah, on those grounds, if Councillor Thompson removes, I would be happy to second the recommendation.
Councillor Dick.
Just in relation to the second recommendation, I find that one a wee bit odd. The location of the proposed dwelling house would be inappropriate, harmful to visual amenity and the scenic and landscape character. And yet when you look at the plan there, it's surrounded by 50 chalets and other dwellings. I can't honestly for the life of me see how one more dwelling is going to have any bigger visual impact. So I certainly couldn't support refusal on that ground. I do have a lot of sympathy with the applicant in terms of the type of business that he's providing, and I would say has been demonstrated to me. I appreciate that that's very subjective. At this stage, I won't move to accept, but hear others.
Sorry, Chair, what did Councillor Dix finish off saying? You're going to...
No, I'm not going to make any recommendation at this stage or move any motion just yet.
Any other members? We have a recommendation to refuse. Is there anyone otherwise minded? Councillor Dick, are you going to spring into action? No?
Yes, I will. I will move that, to my satisfaction, it's been demonstrated that there is a business and a need on site as a caretaker, that it does not contravene structure plan policy E1, Stewardship local plan general policy 7 and 41.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Yen.
I will second Councillor Dix.
Okay. Right, there's been no motion formally moved. Councillor.
Yeah, if it needs to be done, I'll move that we adopt the recommendation.
Councillor Thompson.
I would second that.
Sorry, Councillor Dick, once again, can I clarify, you're moving to grant the planning permission. Would you like to delegate authority to attach conditions? Should that be granted?
Forgive me, Chair, could I ask for an adjournment on this, because I'm a little aware of the fact that I'm on shaky grounds.
Councillor Ogilvie.
Before we have an adjournment again, we've got clear evidence that from Mr Sutty that it's very, very difficult to attach a condition when there's no business. It's a loose collection of contracts. So we can have as many adjournments as we like. What is the officers going to attach to that as conditions? I find that, we've had the clear evidence, we've had a debate. I question the competency of the amendment or motion, whatever it is.
Councillor Coxey.
Yeah, I mean, I got a bit worried when we're taking these decisions and we appear to be on the hoof
people are coming along deciding to move a motion or an amendment. Now, this doesn't look good public perception of how we make planning decisions. And quite frankly, I think that something needs to be looked at a future date. But if members are minded to go against recommendations, they have got all the planning books or information at home. They should look that up at the time. If they're doubtful about something, they can seek advice from Mr. Sutty, then come here, hear the case, and be prepared. But I think it's a bit of nonsense that we're being shown as a planning authority to be all over the place, continually having to take recesses because members want to try and change a decision on the hoof. I'm decidedly unhappy about this. I think if members are minded to change decisions, the ample opportunity to do their homework prior to a meeting and to seek advice prior to a meeting, rather than having to take recesses and go away try to cobble something together.
I'd
make
hate
my
them
point,
to.
Chair.
Sorry, who spoke? Councillor Hislop.
Chair, my understanding under the standing orders is we've had a request for an adjournment. Should we take that motion and amendment, if that needs to go forward first before we actually look to discuss the substantives? It may be that we felt that we shouldn't take that.
Councillor Geddes.
For the record, sir, I would second Councillor Dick's request. He seconded granting an adjournment. I'm not suggesting that on that basis that I necessarily agree with what may or may come forward as a consequence of that. But there have been adjournments granted recently, one earlier on today, and one, I think it was the last meeting, memory serves me correctly, where Councillor Drybrough and I were the parties concerned. And at the end of the day, that was afforded to us. So, and there was no, if memory serves me correctly, there was no complaints made then about policy being made in the hoof, etc. And therefore, as far as I'm concerned, we should. I'll second Councillor Dickney's request for an adjournment. Leave it at that. I think I've conveyed my sentiments.
Great sympathy with him because it shows that he's not preempting the case before he comes to. And so we'll have an adjournment. It is 12:20 return.
I think in consideration, I can accept that the movers to refuse are perfectly right. Can't enforce Section 75. It would largely be pointless. And because there's no formal factoring agreement, it would be very difficult to impose conditions here. An occupancy condition, I understand is a possibility, but I don't think I would want to encumber any applicant with that, or the council for that matter, for what might ultimately be a possibility of eviction and even demolition. That would be a ridiculous situation to be in. Can I first of all say that I came into this application with no predetermined position, felt from the papers that the recommendation was correct, but what I've heard from the applicants and speakers from the debate gave me a different position, and I reserve that right in any application to change my mind on the basis of the evidence I hear. Given what I've said earlier, I would change my decision and go with the motion on one condition if the mover and seconder would accept it, that I felt that recommendation 2 was a very weak recommendation, and I would prefer if we could take that out and refuse on the grounds of the first issue.
Councillor Hislop, you were the mover.
Chair, I have no issue with that. I think the main one is the fact that it's policy D4 and it doesn't fit into that criteria. I think you could design a house to fit in there if you wanted to. If that gets unanimity, I'm happy to go with just the D4 part.
Councillor Thompson.
Having listened to what Councillor Hislop says, I honestly believe that a house could be designed in accordance with it, but I also believe that the key issue is whether or not that is essential for the operation, and I don't believe it is. I'd be happy to go along with Councillor Hislop.
Okay, so we're refusing on condition A, reason 1, opposed to reason 1 and 2.
Chair, just as a point of order, should Councillor Yen...
oh, sorry, Councillor Yen had
Thank you, Chair. I will respect Councillor Dick's decision.
Okay. Are we agreed on that? Okay, thank you, Paula.
The decision is to refuse on the grounds that it has not been demonstrated that a dwelling house is essential at this location for the needs of the caretaking agents of business, contrary to Plan Policy D4.
Okay. We move on to item 8 on the agenda, which is erection of 50-metre high meteorological wind monitoring mast for a temporary period of 3 years at Valley View, Ringford, Castle Douglas. Judith Turnbull again, please.
Thank you, Chair. Worse. That's a relief, thank you. Yes, this is an application for a meteorological mast for temporary permission for 3 years. It's the location plan, circular application site just in the centre of the image, just to the northeast of Culcaigry Law. The site's on agricultural land, about 600 metres north of the road that runs along, sort of along the middle of the image, which takes in Loch Hill and Mark Farm. Members may recall there was a similar application for a mast that came before you in November, and the site for that one, it was called Hybercapel, and the site for that was about 500 metres north of this site. This is block plan, just closer in. The application site is at a height of approximately 117 metres above ordnance datum. It's in a drumlin pasture landscape. As I said before, it's just next to Culcaigry Law. This is a designated local wildlife site. It's called Culcaigry and Trostry Law, and it includes that bulge. It extends out to the bulge in black, which is just almost at the edge of the application site. This is the details of the mast, 50 metres high. It's a 200mm diameter steel tower held in place by guy wires with data logging instrumentation at various intervals on the way up. This is a view of the site from the northeast. It's just taken from the corner of the field that the site is within. The site is just at the edge of the end of the trees, the end of the trees to the right. And the trees indicate the edge of the wildlife site. And that's Culcaigry Loch in the distance. This is taken from the site.
Chair. Chair. Just say which trees, what trees?
Oh, sorry. The trees in the centre of the image. It's sort of, if you look, there's, if I can show you maybe, the site's about there. It's not off this leg. It's sort of about there, in my estimate. Sorry. This is a view looking north-northwest. Looking north just looks in, you can see how the field gets higher as you go round. So this is the last view before we go north, and I couldn't get a view of anything except field. So this is looking up towards Meikle Culcaigry Hill. And this is a view from the site south, looking towards the minor road and towards Mark Farm. This is a view from Mark Farm. It's the application site is just over a kilometre away, and it's showing, you can see there's backdrop onto hills. The site is much lower than the hills. From a landscape point of view, I consider, given the slimline profile and the distance from key receptors, it's not considered there will be a significant adverse landscape impact, nor I consider there would not be an unacceptable cumulative impact. So in conclusion, the proposal is considered to be in accordance with the development plan policies and recommended for approval subject to condition.
Thank you. Judith, if I could just ask, that in that particular photograph we're looking at there, that slide we're looking at there, is the mast, there's a brown sort of hill now thing, which the arrow's pointing at. Is it beyond that now, or is it on this side of it?
Thank you. The brown is just really the colour of the fields in that area, and I reckon that the brown is that those fields behind the mast, the fields that the other mast, they're talking about that bit there.
Yeah, that's right.
That field is the mast, that field there is the field behind the one that the application site is on, which rises, the one that High Bar Cable mast was approved on, so it actually sits before that.
Okay. Any other questions for the officer? No? Okay. We have one speaker speaking for two people here. Could I ask Mrs. Waterworth to come forward, please? And she's speaking at this stage on behalf of Janet Gibson. Mrs. Waterworth, if you could. Behalf this time, and you have a further 3 minutes. Thank you.
We are told repeatedly that each planning application will be judged on its merits. So what are the merits of the Valley View mast, and how would we judge them? The underlying rationale of the Scottish Government's planning policies and strategies, and indeed that of the new LDP, is sustainable economic growth, and the principal challenge is emissions abatement. The Valley View mast, when viewed in these contexts, does not meet or contribute to either, when judged on its own merits. Neither, in landscape terms, can it be justified. It would contribute nothing to the landscape and only diminish its character. It is incompatible with the natural landscape features. At 50 metres high, it is the quintessential sore thumb. It would add to the cumulative impact when considered together with the other two masts and two turbines already approved within a triangle of 1.5 kilometres. The High Bar Cable mast approved late last year is just 480 metres away. How many masts in such close proximity would it take before the landscape clutter is deemed unacceptable? It would add nothing to the economic prosperity of the locality and simply detract from it, as it signals the possibility of turbines down the line, with a long period of uncertainty for tourist businesses and house sale. How many years of uncertainty from the first rumbling to the finished development must local people and businesses withstand? It saves no emissions, but simply adds to them through the processes of manufacture, installation, and transportation. There is no gain from this mast application whatsoever, whether that is in terms of landscape, economy, or emissions abatement, and I urge you to refuse permission. I'd add one thing. It is a total anomaly to have wind energy policies that do not encompass wind mast application. And I would ask you, please, if you would address this in future planning policy statements.
Thank you, Mr. Waterworth. Any questions for the lady? No? Okay, thank you, Mr. Waterworth. You can take your seat. Tracy, could you switch off that microphone, please? We are in session. We're in session, ladies and gentlemen. Councillor Dryborough.
Thanks, Chair. And unfortunately, I think we've been here that many times before that we talk about temporary installations and things like that. We don't really know whether it's temporary or not. But certainly in the past, we have, in most occasions, agreed the meteorological mass. However, there has been on occasion that we have changed the amount of time that that particular mast may actually be there. And these masts are to gather information with regards wind speeds and things like that. And so, looking at the overall conclusion of the report, I do tend to agree with it. However, I do disagree with the amount of time that's actually going to be given to this particular report, and I would like to change that to 2 years, as we have done previously in other reports. Other than that, Chair, I would agree with the recommendations, and that's me not putting a motion forward or anything like that, it's just to hear what people say.
Councillor Geddes.
Well, I would certainly agree with that, sir, because I think, you know, paragraph 4.16, you know, sums up the conclusion admirably as far as I'm concerned. But I do take the point that Councillor Driver is making. I'd be inclined to agree with him, and if he's prepared to move that recommendation 2 be amended to reduce the period, the duration from a period of 3 years to 2 years, I would certainly support him in that, sir.
Councillor Maitland.
The question was asked, and I think it is a perfectly reasonable question to ask, about at what point does one consider cumulative effects of these masts, even though they are slimline and they are, because you know, there are 2 here already in, and the objector made the point that every farmer in the southern Sturtry area is now thinking, let's stick up a meteorological mast and just suck it and see. And I would like to know at what stage one does say, actually, the place is looking like a pincushion. There are too many of these.
Thank you, Chair. If I could answer, obviously in the report we've had a look at cumulative issues and we've quoted various masts fairly close at hand. There's the 2 at 4.8. We've also mentioned the turbines as well, the ones that Mrs Waterworth also raised as well. These have been taken into account as part of the application, so you're always looking at it cumulatively and in the knowledge of what the status is of previous applications. So if it's been approved already or even built after an approval, you've got to take that into account. In simple terms, you've got to consider each case on its merits, and you've got to consider it in the light of cumulative considerations such as masts and turbines at the time you're looking at that planning application. I don't think the situation with turbines is maybe as contagious as was suggested in the southern Sturtry, but we do take care to plot the location of turbines at the moment on our DGI system and their status in the system. For example, if they've been refused, approved, or whether they're still pending a decision. I can't really be more helpful than that. There is theoretically obviously a point at which you would reach where cumulative impact would be considered to be unacceptable. We've seen that with some of the larger schemes. But it's really on a case-by-case basis. But clearly in this case, the officer doesn't think that cumulatively this would be unacceptable.
Councillor Maitland, do you wish to come back?
Yes, not to the officer. No, I understand what is being said. And to be honest, while I do recognise that there is an anxiety about this, it is temporary. It is on a planning basis. It would be, and Councillor Driver is suggesting 2 years, which I have no objection at all. If we're able to change that. There have been masts, and in fact, actually, they become invisible because they are slim with respect to meteorological conditions. They become very slender and slim. So on the basis that it is temporary and with advice on 2 years, I wouldn't have a difficulty.
Councillor Dick.
Just a question on, I know this has come up before and we've reduced it from 3 to 2 years. Is there any particular reason for the 3 years, or can the same amount or sufficient data be gathered from a 2-year period? And one other thing that I always meant to ask when we're considering cumulative effect of either these masts or wind turbines, is there ever any consideration taken into account of pylons that are in the vicinity of any such structures?
Chair, thanks. If I could answer that, it's within the gift of the Planning Applications Committee, obviously, to decide if you want to grant permission or refuse it. Likewise, if you want to amend the condition to 2 years instead of 3, I don't see that as being particularly unreasonable. I don't know whether or not they can get the data they need within 2 years. My gut reaction is I think they probably would be able to, although it wouldn't be as good as a 3-year data set. So, quite honestly, I don't think it's unreasonable. The application's been made for 3 years. We've thought that's okay, but equally, if you want to restrict that to 2 years to minimise, if you like, the visual impact in the locality, then I think, you know, it seems reasonable to me to do that. As far as pylons go and other structures in the environment, obviously there's a lot more going on than just masts and turbines. And when the officer goes out and does the site visit, I would expect them to take cognizance of these factors as well. And sometimes it helps in a landscape if you've got electricity poles or pylons or something like that, because it gives you a scaling point, if you like. You know generally how large that is. You know, trees, things like that, larger structures, whether they be man-made or natural, they do help in the assessment of the case, and there's something that's taken into account, because they can make a difference. If you've got a bare landscape, or you've got something that's got a lot of trees in it, or pylons, overhead lines, you're going to look at it differently.
Is it on the same point, Archie? No. Okay. I've got Councillor Ogilvie, Councillor Gilroy, Ferguson, and Dryborough to speak. Councillor Ogilvie.
Thanks. On the first point, the pylons, all the pictures I've ever seen, there's no pylons in the pictures. So, and pylons tend to be on main routes because they carry a lot of current. Anyway, so I don't know if that's relevant. I wanted to go to, I thought Mrs. Waterworth made a lot of good points, and on the cumulative effect. And if it was quoted here in 4.8, we granted permission for one of these masts in the 3rd of December 2012, approximately 470 metres from this proposed one. Is the wind different in that area? You know, can we localise the wind? I mean, the whole point of these things is to gather data. We've got somebody within close proximity who might share the data with somebody. Why everybody wants their own mast to collect their own data, such close proximity, because I'm sure the wind in Dumfries is the same in Annan when I'm driving along here, which is 17 miles away. I wouldn't need a mast to tell me that the wind, if it's windy in Annan, it's going to be windy in Dumfries. So the point I'm making is that carries a lot of relevance to me because of the accumulation effect. So, do you have an adjournment? No, I am. No, I'm being serious. There is a point here that 450 metres away, there is one granted. It's going to get built. The whole purpose of these things is to collect data. So why is all these people collecting their own data? Because there must be all different companies, obviously, don't want to share because commercial confidentialities. That doesn't help us with the cumulative effect. You know, we've got a responsibility to the legacy we leave in this country. I mean, I'm only a councillor for 5 years, then I might not get elected again. I'm careful what I leave behind in my name. So I think there's an argument here to refuse this on the cumulative effect because there's a mast already 450 metres away. Now, I don't know if that fits in with planning. I'm sure somebody will help me word something, but I can see that there's a valid argument for that.
I don't pretend to be an expert on these things, but I am told by wind farm developers that it can be quite, use the jargon, topographically different. So you might be half a kilometre away, but the topography of the land and the hills does make a difference. So, and you're quite right as far as it would be nice if they all shared information. We had the same issue with telecom masts a number of years ago, trying to get the different operators to share. But if it's different land and different potential developers, they may not. So we can't force that. We can't really, as a planning authority, question the need. If they've submitted an application, it's for us to determine on that. And it could get to a point where if you've got so many in a close proximity that we would say, yes, cumulatively, that is going to have an adverse effect on the landscape. We haven't got there yet. That's the assessment with this particular application, is we're not there yet. As far as a legacy goes, this is only 2 years that the committee are talking about.
Yeah, the anemometers on the 50-metre high might have a difference, but when you put something that's 400 foot high or 100, the wind's very much similar up there. So I take your point, but you know we're talking about a step towards something, and the wind up there is very, very similar.
Same subject, Councillor McKee.
Hi, you're on about one anemometer mast, and there's another 470 metres right there. Now, if they were wanting to put a dozen turbines up, is that one anemometer mast going to cover that area? And if it does, why can he not use the mast that's 470 metres away?
Yep. Councillor Gilroy.
Well, my question was actually the same as Councillor Dick's regards the 3-year thing, and I just wonder if, I always assumed that they needed 3 years to get the proper data, but if they don't, why do we not just, as an automatic policy, say actually a temporary mast is 2 years and be done with it? Because temporary is temporary, and less time they're up, I would suggest, the better. And I just wondered if that would be a way we could go forward in future.
The majority of applicants do look for 3 years because 1 year is not going to give you a genuine picture. It's just going to, you get an exceptional year. 2 years will give you a better picture. It will give you the impression over a more meaningful period. They look for 3 because it is even more meaningful. As I understand it, you can work from the data you get within 2 years. 1 year is definitely insufficient. You just aren't going to get the bigger picture. But the industry standard seems to be to apply for 3. And certainly historically we've often granted for 3, but equally I'm quite comfortable with the idea it sits within your gift, as Robert said, to amend it down to 2 years. They did apply for 3, so it's been considered.
Councillor Ferguson.
It's been partially asked and answered, Chair. And again, I was questioning here whether there was an industry standard for time scale for information data surveys. And I think if there isn't, if there is one, we could get some definite. Take Robert's point that he doesn't know of any, but if there is an industry standard, we need to know what it is and find out, because I would actually hate then we're going to end up having applications for developments coming in the back of this, which would then be based on data that could be argued was not proper data because and allowable. I would also just maybe like to add in here and get away from this temporary and make it a fixed term license, planning permission, because temporary to me means something which is a few weeks or something like that. And I know if you say fixed term, I'm applying the analogy like contract law. That's where you do that. So just something to chuck in the ring there, and I actually think give them a fixed term license.
Councillor Dryborough.
Thanks, Chair. The situation with these anemometers is you'll get information from the day they're actually put up, and they'll download the data into the computer system. And you can probably gather as much information in 3 months as what you can carry over 2 years, because the wind, the direction of the wind and that is usually the same within the areas, depending on type of weather that you actually get. So I believe there's more than enough information that they can gather over the 2 years. It is temporary, of course, and this doesn't, of course, give them the right to say at the end of 2 years I'm going to build wind farms. I've got to come forward with a proposal for that particular thing as well. And again, every application will be determined on whatever the policies are at the particular time. So I'm quite happy to propose that we go with the recommendation with the reduction of the period to 2 years from the date of implementation. But hopefully within that 2 years, the companies that are putting these anemometer masts will actually sit down and talk to each other and talk about sharing data so that they don't have to come forward with every field in this area having an anemometer per mast. So hopefully that'll encourage these different companies to talk together.
Councillor Geddes.
I would certainly agree with that, sir. Previously indicated, please second Councillor Dryborough that reduction. I would observe, sir, that paragraph 4.8, first bullet point, of course, you're talking about a temporary master granted last February for a period of 18 months. So, you know, obviously that particular developer in these particular circumstances felt that he, she or they could get all the relevant data they required within that, you know, that much more truncated timescale. But going back to Archie's last point about endeavouring to prevail upon developers to cooperate, can I ask, presumably Mr. Sutty, sir, through yourself, is there a forum, you know, where in fact perhaps planning authorities can meet, planning authority representatives can meet with such as developers representatives in relation to this sphere of activity, where that, to me, which is a perfectly sensible suggestion, could be put to them and the point made, look, we appreciate that you operate on the basis of commercial confidentiality, but, you know, we have real concerns, you know, acting as we do or representing as we do with people of Dumfries and Galloway, that this is going to result in an unacceptable proliferation of, albeit slim, slender, call them what you will, masts. And it would seem to me that if there is such a forum, that would be the sort of place to raise it. And if there's no such a forum, should we maybe be considering, Chairman, whether or not we should be instrumental in trying to get one set up with kindred local authorities in Scotland?
Yes, point is well made. The analogy I made before with telecoms masts is very similar. Basically, if you go back however many years ago it was, about 10 or more years, we were getting a lot of telecom masts popping up all over the place, and planning authorities were saying quite legitimately, can we not have this as an industry getting together and trying to sort out sharing of masts? The two bodies that come to mind here is that there is Scottish Renewables would be the industry for it. Probably HOPS, Heads of Planning, particularly the Development Management Subcommittee, which I do sit on, would be the appropriate body to try and broker some discussion on that. So I'll try and take that forward at the next available meeting that we have on that.
Thank you, Mr. Sutty. Councillor McCaughey.
Thanks, Chairman. I think the issue that you highlighted there about the cumulative effect, but what concerns me in this one, if you look at it, one was granted for 18 months. I don't know the reason why it was 18 months. And we'll get the results on that one by August 2013. But the nearest one to the one we're about to grant was granted for 3 years, which means it's not going to report to December 2015. This one has come after that one. If we agree to 2 years, that will report in 2015. Now, we might not be doing the objectors a favour here by cutting that time to 2 years. Because what I'm not clear about is, it may well be the one that was granted for 3 years, which is going to come back to us in 2015, could have been looking at a 10-turbine development. This one could be looking at a 40-turbine development. What you're effectively doing by cutting, and there's only 470 metres between the one we granted for a 3-year period and this one, my concern is that means this one will be ready to come back to the Planning Committee before the one we granted 2 or 3 months ago. I think what we really need, because we're all flying about in the dark here, what we need is a bit of training for the elected members. We're making assumptions here. Now, I don't know anything about the meteorological vagaries of the wind. I do know a bit about statistical analysis. And I don't know whether you can get the same statistical analysis of wind in 1 year that you would in 2 years or 3 years. I think we need a consistency of approach here, because what we're effectively doing is perhaps giving one developer the edge over another by giving him a shorter period in order to carry out his wind survey than we granted to somebody else in the same area 3 months ago. So for that case, I'm going to adhere, in this particular case, to the recommendation as outlined. And I'd also like to suggest that we have a training session for members with somebody who can tell us the ins and outs of the wind, and if it is necessary, to go, as Archie said, for 3 months, 1 year, 2 years, and having adopted that, I think should be a consistent approach across the area, particularly where issues are cumulative.
Thank you. Councillor Dick.
Thanks, Chair. I think the point that Councillor McCaughey makes is well made. I hadn't considered that before, but I think on that basis I would support that if he's intending to make it a motion.
Okay. Councillor Hislop.
Chair, it could also work the other way. If we do it in 2 years, we find out that we can't put wind turbines up earlier than 3 years. And it might be worthwhile having some training on wind flows. I know we're all good on hot air, but I don't know if we're good on air wind farms.
Right, Councillor Thompson.
Could I just ask for clarification on, the temporary nature of this? If a developer finds that he has enough information within a year, then he could submit an application. Is that correct?
Sorry, you could submit an application for turbines. Yeah, it's open to them at any point to submit any application they so wish. They're obviously not going to do so unless they feel they have sufficient information to show whether or not it's justified to do so. They could get the information in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and decide that's sufficient to put an application in. They could even jump to putting an application without amendment. It's open to them. All I can really say is that this is what they've applied for. It is equally condition 2 can be competently varied to change that. They would have a right of appeal to actually, or to submit a further application to vary that. But, you know, taking the comments made by Councillor Ferguson, effectively the fixed term contract is condition 2. We use the title temporary just in the description, just so it's clear that it's not getting a permanent planning permission, because you do get permanent masts that come in with wind farms as well.
Okay, we've got a motion amendment. Paula, could you read out them?
Motion proposed by Councillor Drybrough, seconded by Councillor Geddes, is to approve subject to a change in condition 2, amending the time period to 2 years from the date of implementation. The amendment proposed by Councillor McCotry, seconded by Councillor Dick, is to go with the recommendation as per report. That would be the Chair. Vice Chair. Councillor Blake.
Amendment.
Councillor Dick.
Amendment.
Councillor Drybrough.
Motion.
Councillor Ferguson.
Amendment.
Councillor Geddes. Councillor Gilroy.
Motion.
Councillor Hislop.
Motion.
Councillor Yin.
Amendment.
Councillor McCotry.
Amendment.
Councillor McComb.
Motion.
Councillor McKee.
Motion.
Councillor Maitland.
Motion.
Councillor Ogilvie.
Amendment.
Councillor Thompson.
Motion.
Councillor Tuckfield.
Motion.
There are 9 votes. There are 10 votes for the motion and 7 for the amendment. The motion is carried. The decision is to approve subject to change to condition 2 to 2 years.
Okay, thank you. I would propose to adjourn for lunch at this point. We'll reconvene at 1:30. Councillor Dick, you wish to just say something?
Chairman, apologies for my late arrival this morning. I missed the declarations of interest and just like to put on record that I declare an interest in item 16 and will not be attending it. Do you need a reason? Business connection.
Okay, thank you. Item 9 on the agenda is erection of domestic summer house, garden room and formation of timber decked area to allow wheelchair access and associated landscaping at land adjacent to End House, Wellington Terrace, Carsthorne. Claire Eckstein.
Thank you, Chair. The proposal is for a domestic summer house garden room within the village of Carsthorne. This is an aerial photograph which shows the application site, which lies between the public road and the foreshore. And this is the site plan and sections of the proposed garden room. And this shows a floor plan of the garden room summer house, which is 7.1 metres long by 4.8 metres wide, with a 2.4 metre wide wraparound covered deck area. And these are the elevations which show a timber structure with a slate roof with a covered deck area wrapping around it. These are the photographs of the site. This is looking southwards along the public road with the gated access into the application site marked. This is looking into the application site itself from the outdoor seating area, which is associated with the steamboat inn at Carsthorne. And then this is panning left from the previous photograph, the End House, which is the applicant's property to the left. And then again, panning left from the
previous photograph with end house in the centre, looking along Wellington Terrace. The application, the garden room will be located just to the left of the fence in the photograph, facing the foreshore area, which is on the other side of the fence on the right-hand side. And again, this is panning left from the previous photograph, with the access into the application site to the left. And again, panning left again from the previous photograph, with the gated access into the application site to the right. And you can see the applicant's property end house in the middle centre of the photograph. And this is actually the view from the public car park. And then panning left from the previous photograph. The key issues in consideration of the proposal are set out in the report, but it's due to the proposed garden room cabin structure being forward of the main building lining Carstone on the seaward side of the village between the public road and the foreshore, which detracts from the existing streetscape and openness of Carstone, and the actual design of the building, which does not enhance or reflect the character of Carstone. The proposal is recommended refusal on these grounds.
Thank you, Claire. Any questions for Claire before I go to the speaker? No? Okay. I have one speaker wanting to address us in this, and it's Captain Blackett on behalf of the Carbean Community Council. Captain Blackett, if you take your seat, sir, and somebody will give you a hand to switch on the... That's it.
Am I on?
Captain Blackett, yes, you're on, sir. You've got 3 minutes.
Right. I don't think I'll need 3 minutes. Carbean Community Council's written objection is at 2.1 on page 104. I don't think I need to beef up those points, except perhaps the last one. My memory of Carstone goes back over 70 years, and it does flood from time to time. And I could well foresee a wooden structure on a concrete base being washed away, leaving an ugly concrete base. If you look at the site plan at the very beginning of the application, if you pick up the rectangular black blob, which is the proposed wooden garden house, it would easily fit into the southwest corner of the applicant's garden. The end house isn't actually named on this plan, but it is the one immediately behind the proposed site, where it would have lovely views across livestock, farmland, and Criffle range. And I would just like to say that Carbean Community Council is not a community council that seeks to preserve our district in aspic. And it was with regret that we lodged this objection. There are 11 elected members. 2 asked me to put them down as don't know because they live almost at the Southwark end of our area. The other 9, including myself, were all strong objectors for the reason given on page 104. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain Blackett. Any questions for Captain Blackett? No? Okay, sir, you can take your seat. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we're in session. Anybody, anything? Councillor Geddes.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, so the matter is in short compass. I would move, in fact, that we adopt the recommendations contained in the report to refuse the application on the grounds stated. Paragraph 5.1.
Councillor McCocktree.
Yeah, happy to second that. I think that what they're attempting to do in rehabilitation of ex-servicemen is very commendable, but I think their planning application in that particular site would not add anything to the village. In fact, it would detract. So I think the recommendation should be upheld.
Anyone otherwise minded? Councillor Hislop.
A couple of points of clarification. It says it's forward of the main building line. Well, from my noting, it actually sits further off the road than the 2 houses on that side of the road. So therefore, it isn't forward of the main line, it's behind it. So I have concerns that it actually doesn't reflect the reason. It's on the seaward side of the village. There are a couple of properties, I think it says 2 properties plus 2 huts on the seaward side of the road. So I would say that would cause me concern as well.
Could we have clarification with what you meant, please?
Right. The building line which we've taken in considering this application is the one which is for Wellington Terrace, which you see is quite clear. And if you look on the plan, there's quite a linear structure.
Chair, but it's clearly not on the same side. You should look at the building line of the other side of the road, which has Spindrift, I think it's called.
The significant thing to point out is that this is garden ground associated with End House, and it's in that context because the point which is being questioned is whether or not it's in front of the building line of this list of terraces. Now, all of these properties have garden on the other side of the road, and it's in that context that it's being referred to.
Chair, I'm not sure what the house is called, but just at the edge of our site, we see it. I think it'll be short for cottage. The next property along has a building which is closer to the road than the proposed one. So that is in the garden ground.
Can I draw your attention to page 101? And are you talking about the one due south at Spindrift? So you've got...
No.
No?
The other way, if you look right at the edge of the page, it looks like COTT dot.
Oh, yes.
The next house has a hut of some kind.
Yes.
Closer to the road than the proposed one.
Yes, in that instance, that building is also in front of the building line of its particular property. So if you are comparing this one to the temporary building, the hut which is in Scott, 2 huts. Thank you. Apparently the 2 huts which you're referring to as you go further along back out of the village on the right-hand side as if you were driving northwest, you've got a couple of buildings which used to be fishermen's huts, as I understand it, referred to in the report. And if you're saying that this is behind the building line of that, yes, I would agree with you. But in the context of the way the report has been written, it's about the curtilage of the building, which includes land on both sides of the road. And it's in that context that the building line is being referred to. So in the report that Claire has written, she's saying that it's in front of the building line relative to the property to which it relates.
Thank you for that clarification, because it's usually dealt with the road. I accept that.
Okay, we have a motion. Anyone otherwise minded?
The decision is to refuse the application on the ground set out in the report.
Thank you. Item 10 on the agenda. Right. Had you declared an interest or not? We will retrieve him. Oh, here he is. He's retrieved. Can I proceed? Right. Application number 10. Erection of 12 wind turbines, 130 metres to tip. Total rated output of up to 50 megawatts and associated infrastructure, including construction of internal access tracks and vehicular access from public road. Erection of 1 permanent meteorological mast, substation and control buildings and underground grid connection and extraction of rock from 6 borrow pits at Black Hill to Maghucan Rig, Yukon Water, Sanker. How's that? Patrick.
Thank you, Chair.
Well, that wasn't too bad. I was in the right direction.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just point out a correction, or rather an update to the report at paragraph 4.39. And it's on page 134. It relates to the note at the bottom of that paragraph,
referring to the issue of the Whiteside Hill wind farm application. It should now say that it was issued in February 2013, not January 2013. Thank you. Just run through the photographs. This is the location plan for the application site, and you can see the settlement of Sanka to the right-hand side of the screen and the settlement of Connell to the north of the application site. This is the superseded block plan for the application, showing a cluster of turbines to the bottom left-hand side of the screen with an access road and borrow pits running up to the top right-hand side of the screen. The 6 turbines to the lower left of the screen have been removed, 5 of which have been removed for aviation purposes. They were causing clutter on, or were predicted to cause clutter on the radar for Glasgow Prestwick Airport, and this site is actually the approach into Glasgow Prestwick Airport. So those 5 have been removed, and the further turbine has been removed as a result of landscape reasons. It was the one sitting right down to the bottom of the screen. Typical turbine design, 80 metre to hub, 130 metre to tip. Meteorological mast. Some typical access road sections are shown there. I'll come back to some further discussion on that later. The typical substation buildings and compound layout. And this is a cumulative map that was submitted with the application. You can see the application site centred in the middle of the screen there, outlined in red. To the northwest of the application site, you have in blue the Hare Hill wind farm, and in yellow the Hare Hill extension. In purple to the south, you have the Whiteside permission, and which hasn't been implemented, and to the right of that you have the Aldersyde application, which is still being assessed. Position has changed since that time, and we now have a few more applications and scoping inquiries in that area. Most notably, there is a Section 36 consultation directly to the north of the site. The site shown in this photograph is site 58, and the cluster of turbines to the north of that is the Sandy Now consultation. The ZTV map here shows that views of the turbines will be seen predominantly from the A76 corridor that runs through Sanka and Connell, and that views to the southwest are largely contained by the topography of the hills. I've included a map of the viewpoints here, just to give some orientation of the following slides. We're going to look at viewpoints 2, 16, and then 12, 13, 14, and 15. This is a photo montage of the development from viewpoint 2, which is up in the hills on the Southern Upland Way. Just a note of disclaimer here, the photo montages are representative only. They are meant to be viewed in hard copy at a certain distance from the page itself to give a representative feel of what the turbines would look like, and so they are distorted in this. This is viewpoint 16 along the Yukon Valley. You can see in the wireframe below where the turbines are located, just a cluster of turbines above the horizon in the centre of the page, and zooming in on that, you can see that 3 or 4 turbines that you can see above the horizon. And this is a photograph from the site itself. SNH have recommended that turbines 3 and 4, stepping back, which are the 2 most prominent turbines that you can see there, are removed from the proposal due to the dominating effect that they have on the valley. The applicant has put forward an argument that those turbines would only be seen for a stretch of perhaps 1 kilometre along this road, and that argument is accepted, that the views of those turbines will be seen over a relatively short distance in a relatively underused road, and will be seen by relatively few people. This is a viewpoint 12, Sanka, from the southern upland way through Sanka. And this gives an indication that the proposal will be seen as being relatively distant. The Sanka proposal is shown on the wireframe at the bottom in red, with the turbines to the left being Whiteside Hill and Oolsey Side, and Hare Hill on the right. Zooming in on that again. And a photograph from approximately the same sort of location. Again from Sanka, and this is adjacent to the academy with the sports grounds in the foreground. Again, the Sanka turbines are shown in red. Zooming in closer, and a photograph from the general vicinity. This is moving along the A76, north along the A76, viewpoint 14 between Sanka and Connell, and you can see that the turbines are getting slightly more prominent along the horizon there in the wireframe. Nevertheless, they're still of a scale that is appropriate to the hills. Zooming in on that photo montage. Afraid the turbines aren't coming out very clearly. And this is a site photograph of, again, taken from the same sort of position. And the final viewpoint is from Connell itself, from the recreation. And zooming in again, you can just see the turbines on the horizon there, with Oolsey Side and Whiteside Hill to the left-hand side of the screen. And this viewpoint represents the closest view of the turbines from the settled areas of the valley. And just to point out that the access to the site is fairly constrained, in that no direct access was available through existing roads, public roads or forestry tracks, and so a new access road is to be created, which will stretch from the leftmost turbine, as you see on the screen there, along the hillside and eventually coming out off the photograph. And there is a condition attached to the planning permission to require additional landscaping for that access road to ensure that it blends appropriately into the landscape. And finally, a site photograph, again from direction. This is an extract from interim planning policy on wind energy development, and it shows the application site stretching across 3 areas: an area of search, an area of limited potential, and an area of significant constraint. The area of search contains 4 turbines, the area of limited potential contains 8 turbines, and the area requiring significant protection is restricted simply to approximately 1 kilometre of the access track. The access track in total is 5 kilometres long. Turning to the key issues of the application, the proposal broadly complies with IPP policy as set out in that map. And whilst any wind farm proposal of this scale is likely to result in significant environmental effects, this proposal is acceptable in landscape terms. In terms of the landscape sensitivity and cumulative impact, the proposal would be seen cumulatively with the consented applications at Hare Hill and Whiteside, and with the submitted development at Oolsey Side and the Hare Hill extension. It is likely to result in the landscape capacity for wind farm development in that area being reached. In terms of visual sensitivity, the proposal would be seen over large areas of the A76 corridor. However, both SNH and the landscape architect for the council agree that the significance of the visual impact is generally acceptable. The risks to aviation have been resolved through amendment to the scheme, and the proposal is not predicted to have any adverse impact upon aviation interests. In the event that turbines do affect the radar, leading into Glasgow Prestwick Airport, the turbines will be stopped until appropriate mitigation is put in place. And both Glasgow Prestwick Airport and the applicant are agreeable to a Section 75 to this effect. Scottish Government targets for renewable energy are also an important consideration in support of this proposal, and this scheme would contribute to those targets. And finally, and somewhat remarkably perhaps, there have been no third-party objections to this proposal, and in conclusion, recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Any questions at this stage before we go into session? Councillor Dryborough.
Thanks, Pat. But can you just say again what you said about this wind farm would mean in that particular area, that it would be at capacity, did you say?
Thanks, Jay. Yes, the landscape architect and SNH have both indicated that because of the number of other turbines in that location, this proposal is effectively infilling those existing or consented developments. And so SNH and the landscape architect have effectively set out a stall to say that they're concerned that any further development may not be acceptable on the basis that the capacity of the landscape in that location is unlikely to be able to accommodate any more acceptable turbines. However, that is a matter for any future application to be submitted.
Okay. Councillor Gilroy.
Thank you. I just wonder if Mr. Hanna could expand a little bit on why you're dismissing SNH's requirement to remove turbines 3 and 4.
Okay, thanks, Chair. I'll just go back through the photographs. Yes, SNH have recommended that turbines 3 and 4, which are the two most prominent turbines that you can see centre of the screen there, be removed from the scheme. SNH haven't objected to the proposal. They have put that forward as a suggestion. When that advice was put to the applicants, they went away and carried out some further research and did some further wirelines and viewpoints for the Yukon Valley there that demonstrated that as you're driving through the valley, this section of road with the dip in the hills there was really the only section that you would see, the only section where you would feel the dominating effect of those turbines. The Yukon Valley Road is a very long, narrow, winding road, stretches for many kilometres through the valley there. I think there's 3 or 4 dwellings along that road. It's quite depopulated. It's quite remote. It heads into the forest. It doesn't lead anywhere in particular, and it isn't a heavily travelled road. Given that the dominating effect would be experienced over a relatively short stretch of road by relatively few people, it was overall considered that the turbines in that location were acceptable.
Come back. Well, I just think it's, looking at what SNH have said, they've been quite positive about quite a lot of it, but they do come, they mention it at 2.2a, and then they come back to it again at 2.2g, and also at 2.2d. So they obviously feel quite strongly that it may be remote, it may be not many people see it, but it's very, very prominent. And I just kind of think that perhaps when they come forward with a suggestion like that, perhaps we should take more cognizance.
Councillor Maitland.
Actually, it was exactly the same point. I rather agree with that analysis. I take the point it's very long. I take the point there aren't very many people on it. But on the other hand, it is wild landscape, accessible by car, and uncluttered by turbines. And if we go on to the next slide, I think there's one with a sheep tank. Yes, there. Now, where are the turbines going to be with respect to that?
Chair, they're just on top of the ridge line there. You can see the dwelling house down to the centre of the screen at the end of the road as seen.
And could you possibly tell me how far away from that nearest dwelling? I'm sure it's in there. I'm afraid I haven't seen it.
You'll need to give me a few minutes while I look in the report to see exactly where that is. There is a discussion on that particular dwelling house in the report.
I think it's paragraph 423 on page 131.
It is indeed, and that's a bungalow adjacent to the waterworks, which is 1.6 kilometres away from the turbine.
Okay, Councillor Maitland. Councillor Hislop.
Chair, it's with regard to section 75. My understanding was that we had a policy that PH&E passed with regard to community benefit. It doesn't seem to be appearing in the section 75. Just wondering if there's some reason for that.
Thanks, Chair. We don't have a planning policy requiring any monies to be provided to the council for any turbine development. It is a policy relating to another part of the council. It's not a planning policy.
But Councillor Hislop is correct in as far as the policy of the council now is when we are recommending approval to actually include that. So that's an omission on our part that should actually be part of that recommendation for the section 75. So I apologise for that. I take it as read. It would be in there.
Any other questions before we go? Councillor McComb.
Thank you, Chair. Is there any photomontage from Cloud Hill, which appears to be the highest point of the southern upland way?
Sorry, can I ask for that to be repeated?
Yes. Is there any photomontage from Cloud Hill on the southern upland way?
Not that I'm aware of. Let me just go back to the viewpoints. You can see the viewpoints that have been provided are from those locations there, from Blackcraig Hill on the southern upland way to Watt Hill at viewpoint 2, and then into Sanka at viewpoint 12. They're the three along the southern upland way that done.
It does seem strange that the highest point in the southern upland way has not actually been used as a viewpoint.
Maybe he couldn't get up to it. Why didn't you use that? What, did you use it? Councillor Geddes and I are very good at hill walking. Did you supply these pictures, or was it?
The photo montages are provided by the applicant.
Any other questions at this point? No other questions. We're in session. We have, sorry, Councillor Geddes.
Well, I'm certainly not endeavouring to truncate the debate. I know it's a big application, so it's an important application, but I've been through the report, I've listened to the presentation and the colleagues' questions, and as far as I'm concerned, I have no problems with the recommendations as submitted. I will not move, grant the application on the basis detailed at the moment. Interested as always to hear colleagues' views, but that's certainly the way my mind's working.
Councillor Hislop.
Yeah, in line with that, I would move the recommendations, including the additional part to the section 75 with regard to community benefit.
Anyone otherwise minded? No? Okay.
The decision is to approve the application subject to the inclusion in the section 75 of the community benefit clause and with the section 75 conditions as set out.
Thank you. We move on now to item 11 on the agenda. Construction of landform and erection of steel sculpture with LED lights to apex of landform and associated temporary access track at the field to east of southbound Slip Road, junction of A75 and A74, Gretna. Lindsay Brown.
Thank you, Chair. If members would like to look at the location plan on page 145 of the committee papers, then I'll take you through the slides. This first photograph has been taken from the B7076, just to the south of the Gretna Gateway Outlet Village. It's looking east along the footpath which leads to the application site, and the landmark itself would be visible above the trees, sort of roughly in the centre of the photograph. Moving along the footpath and under the motorway, this photo is taken from the southern corner of the application site looking north. The existing trees and bushes adjacent to the motorway can be seen to the left of the photograph, and the trees and bushes along the River Sark can be seen to the right. The application site, which covers an area of 4.41 hectares, extends to the bushes and hedge line, which can just be seen on the horizon. Moving along the southern boundary of the site and turning to look back towards the motorway, the Gretna Gateway can be seen in the distance, and the steel sculpture, which would be located approximately 32 metres from the motorway, would extend upwards from a point approximately just to the right of the blue motorway sign in the centre of the photograph. Turning back to look northeast, flat, darker green fields beyond is proposed for the temporary site compound. Moving north onto higher ground, this photo has been taken midway along the eastern boundary of the application site, north of Hustle Bank, looking back in a westerly direction towards the motorway. Again, the steel sculpture would extend upwards approximately opposite the Gretna Gateway buildings to the right of the centre of the photograph. From the high point towards the north of the site, this photo looks southeast towards the River Sark and the Scotland-England border. The motorway can be seen to the right, and again the sculpture would extend up from a point just to the right of the centre of the photo. This is a view of the application site from the motorway just before crossing the River Sark and the national border. This is a view looking north towards the application site from the motorway bridge on the A6071, which lies in England. Travelling along to Plump Bridge on the Scotland-England border, this photo looks south along the line of the proposed temporary construction access. An access would be formed onto the public road, and the temporary access would generally follow the line of the river
cross the railway and extend approximately 850 metres as far as the proposed site compound. From Springfield, this photo looks south along the existing footpath and agricultural access, which provide pedestrian access to the landmark and access for future maintenance. Moving further along this existing access track, this photo shows the general nature of the track, and given its restricted nature, it's not considered suitable for construction traffic, hence the requirement for temporary construction access. Maintenance is expected to be minimal, and this existing access track is considered as an acceptable means for access for this purpose. This aerial view shows in purple the two core paths which already exist in the locality. One links Gretna with Springfield and the other runs along the north bank of the Sark. Pedestrian access to the landmark would be by way of these existing core paths. This is the proposed site plan for the landmark, and it shows the application site and its relationship to the motorway, the national border, Gretna, Springfield and Gretna Gate. This final slide shows three photo montages of how the proposed landmark would look. The image to the top right shows the site as you approach from the north on the motorway. Bottom left image is as you would look from level with the Gretna Gateway, and the bottom right image gives an impression of how it would appear as you approach the Scottish border from the south. The application is recommended for approval for the reasons set out in the report.
Thank you, Lindsay. I'm pleased to see you here because there's a photograph there taken from the motorway, and if you stood in the middle of that very long, you might not have made it. Are there any questions for Lindsay at this stage? Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks. I'm just a bit bemused that in actual fact we're not looking at a parking area now, because of the evidence of the Angel in the North End to go by. It's a massive tourist attraction, and people stop and go in and get their pictures taken beside it. And my worry here is that we're depending on what's effectively private car parking to meet the demands of people who might want to go and see it. So would we not have a recommendation in here somewhere that there should be parking facilities a bit closer to it than that? Because my understanding of this is there's only one little footpath underneath the motorway. You've got a railway and a motorway between where we're going to park and where the site is.
The intention of the development is as a landmark rather than a visitor attraction. It's designed to be seen from a distance and to be viewed by passing traffic on the motorway, the local road network and the West Coast Main Line. It hasn't been designed specifically to be accessed by vehicles or pedestrians, and no vehicular access proposed for visitors, and it wouldn't be actively encouraged. However, the existence of the core paths do allow pedestrian access to the site. There is existing on-street parking at Springfield and also parking within the town of Gretna itself. It's not just at the Gretna Gateway, but parking available in the town.
That's exactly my point. In actual fact, it's quite some considerable distance from the footpath from Springfield, from the village, when you get down over the bridge and around the corner. I'm looking at my two colleagues here for that part of the world. I used to live in that village, and I can tell you I wouldn't fancy doing that work every day of the week to go and see, it. What I'm more concerned about is I think there's been a picture here of the underpass, just how fit it is for purpose, for if significant numbers start to go and actually visit the site. And we can't just dismiss, because that's what the application is the potential consequences if we take the history attached to Angel of the North. It is a significant tourist attraction and significant traffic right up to the base of the thing. So I think we need to have a wee look at that.
Remind members we're still in the questions stage of the proceedings. Archie.
Thanks, here. Maybe to help that situation. I mean, obviously there's a group looking at this particular landmark in Gretna, and discussions have been ongoing regarding car parking and that as well. There is a car park at the Gretna Green, the Smiths area and things like that, and there was obviously tourists is a really important question for that particular area. So there is car parking there, and the idea was, I believe, because I'm not part of the group that actually looks at that, to have some form of small minibus type transportation from that car park down. It would improve job opportunities, that type of thing as well. But there is parking there for a small number of cars in the Springfield area, and the core paths do cover quite an area of that. I do, however, share the concerns that if there's a big influx initially of people coming to see that particular landmark, then there may be concerns, or it's maybe something we need to talk to the group about to see if they put anything in place.
Are there any further questions for Lindsay at this stage? No further questions. We're now in debate. Archie?
Yeah, just coming back to, I mean, obviously the landmark proposal has been discussed for a couple of years now, and there's a lot of work going on to get funding and that particular thing. We've seen the one in the north of England bring a lot of work into the particular area. This is about full planning permission for it. There is perhaps an opportunity in the recommendations to discuss with the applicant how they're actually going to work out the issue with regard to parking. But certainly within that particular area in Gretna, this has been seen as a good thing that can happen. Albeit I am a great United Kingdom fan, I am Scottish as well. I like to see the board, I'd like to see that, you know, where people coming across the border, at least they know they're in Scotland, not that I want to see it separate from the rest of the UK. So the situation is, Chair, I'm quite happy to go with the recommendations on this particular report, but there may be some discussion needs to happen with regard to the car parking issue initially.
Councillor Geddes.
I would certainly agree with that, sir. Well, not Archie's, not in relation to Archie's comments. His geopolitical comments rather than his plan. I certainly agree with his planning comments, sir. But I think we've got to be careful, and I'm not lecturing anyone. Let me make that clear to you. This is a tremendous achievement, as has already been said. I mean, this can do a significant amount of good for this part of our region. And yes, the parking issue is obviously not a consideration. But please don't let's create the impression today that we're sort of approving this, as I hope we will do, albeit begrudgingly. Parking is a legitimate concern. Fine, let's address that, get it addressed in the appropriate forum. But as far as I'm concerned, I would hope today that we embrace this enthusiastically.
Councillor Tuckfield.
Thank you. I do embrace it enthusiastically. My one concern is there doesn't seem to be a lot of consideration for perhaps elderly people who cannot, or disabled people who cannot access on the routes that we have. And I also think we're underestimating the importance of something like this, because entering Scotland is slightly different from going to see the Angel of the North. You're entering Scotland, and I think it's going to bring a lot of tourism, a lot of interest, and I hope that we do look at improving parking.
Councillor McCoxtree.
Chairman, I think it's probably wasted a good field, to be quite honest. I'm not too taken with the design. I think it's fairly visually obtrusive, but I think the one thing that's got to be tackled is if we're going to go ahead with it, is the parking, and that should be done now, quite honest. If it is going to become a tourist attraction like the Angel of the North, there's very little parking in that area, and I can imagine if I had a business in the Gretna Gateway Centre, and it was getting overrun with people who are just going to park there to go and visit that monstrosity or thing of beauty, whatever beauty is now the beholder, then I'd be pretty worried. And I think that the developer should be paying for car parking of some description, and that should be in the recommendations.
Good to see. Councillor Geddes.
Why on earth does Scots do we continually shoot our saloon? Never mind, let's treat that as a rhetorical question. Going back to the point that Councillor Tuckfield has made, I think it's a very valid point, the issue of access. Let's incorporate that and roll it up and include it in the issue of the wider issue of the car parking.
Councillor Ogilvie.
It's just an observation that some of the applications we've looked at today is to try and mitigate the visual impact, and this one is to maximise the visual impact, which is, I'm all confused now, Chair.
Maybe we could tie a windmill to top it. We have a recommendation to approve, subject to conditions. Are there any extra conditions that you would wish attached to this to do with car parking? David?
Well, I would refer members to page 154, paragraph 416, where you have the comments of the roads officer there. So they have looked at that very issue, and so it's been advised, however, that were this development to evolve into a visitor attraction in the future with additional facilities, as appears to be an experience with Angel of the North, then there may be a requirement at that time to consider a package of dedicated car parking provision in conjunction with the improved access and signing arrangements. Basically, again, you have an application before you. There isn't a parking provision. There isn't anything more than what's already been outlined by Lindsay. I don't think you'd be attaching a competent condition to actually require car parking area to go on as part of this application, because it could well be out with the application site. I wouldn't go there effectively.
Councillor Gady.
Okay, I take the points that are coming from Mr. Sutty, they're well made as always. But can I suggest then that in approving this today, that we flag up that some of us would like to see this become a visitor attraction rather than merely a landmark. And I would like to think that if we can work towards that status, that we certainly would deal with the issue of parking and access. Is that perhaps a way of doing it, sir? I'm not even suggesting a directive. I'm suggesting an observation.
That's a fair point, and I think, again, that's reflected in the comments of paragraph 416, that it acknowledges that it could well do that, and certainly if it's the aspiration of members that it becomes such, then that might well require a separate application. Obviously, my concern is that if this is delayed to go and look into land acquisition and so on, then it might not happen at all, whereas this is a separate issue which we could look at with probably a separate application to come forward. I just wouldn't want to hinder this particular application.
Councillor McCaughey.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I mean, at the end of the day, if it did become a visitor attraction, who's going to pay for the car parking? Because this landmark trust has set it up. Can we make them responsible for providing any car parking? I mean, it seems to me that if we go ahead with this, if you notice the wee NB at the bottom of page 154, any illegal parking is a matter for the police. Are we just piling up a big problem here for the police? Folks stopping on the shoulder of the motorway there to take photographs, that kind of thing. If people want to build these kind of monuments, they should take responsibility for all aspects of it. And I really think we need to put something within the planning conditions about parking. And that should be done now. Otherwise, if we end up having to provide car parking, this council will be picking up the tab for it.
I've just been told we can't put in a condition about that. Got a whole raft of folk throwing their hands in all directions here. Councillor McKee.
Thanks, Chair. I was just reading this wee bit to Cumbria County Council asking for a viewing lay-by on the northern side of the A6071. It just occurred to me before that the bridge that Lindsay stood on to take a photo is an ideal place for cars to stop and view the thing. So it can create its own problems.
Councillor McComb.
Thank you, Chair. Just in the very point Councillor McKee was raising there, I notice our colleagues on the south side of the border are not recommending, they're requesting a viewing point. And we are saying that it is recommended the applicant pursues this matter. That they clearly are taking a rather different viewpoint with regard to parking.
Councillor Drybury, you're next on the list.
The bridge is on the English side. We can't put any applications on there, right? So we can't do it. Chair, I think the parking thing is an issue. The Gretna Regeneration Group are looking at all sorts of things to highlight issues in Gretna and try to improve, people, the visitors' attraction, that type of thing. Perhaps saying it's an idea from this committee to say to the Gretna Regeneration Group, you need to look at car parking for this particular landmark, rather as have it come through. I mean, it'll eventually come as a planning application anyway, so therefore get the Regeneration Group to look at that.
Councillor Maitland.
Well, it's really just to say that I mean, I see this as much more of a kind of stop that you see as you go past. I mean, nobody, I don't think, stops and goes and visits the heavy horse just outside Glasgow, or stops and looks at the horn on the road between Glasgow and Edinburgh. And they just look out for it as something quite exciting and nice to see as you go past. But the only thing that I would say is possibly against our argument would be that Gretna, being a place where people get married, you might well find that people want photographs of it. And that's at that point that I think you might well consider that there would be more of a demand than you would naturally expect for a landmark.
They might even want to be married standing beside it. Councillor Ogilvie.
Thanks, Chair. I welcome this. It's been a while in the coming. Just to follow on from the safety theme, this is a construction, whether you like it or not, but it's going to have quite a lot of LEDs in it, which would be best viewed at night, obviously. So there's a safety issue there. If people want to see it when it's lit up. I mean, if it's lit up today, you wouldn't see it. It's too sunny. I imagine at night it'd be pretty spectacular when it's all lit up. That's when there's a safety issue for me.
Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, I mean, I've been supportive of this site for quite a long time, but it's the practicalities of the whole thing here, Chair. If we don't do something about it now, or we don't encourage them to be innovative in how they approach the parking issues now, we have a site that's bounded by a river, a motorway, and a railway line. Right? It isn't made for easy access, I've got to say, and it would be, if they're already putting in a service road now, I'm just thinking the considerations here and whether that should be looked at. I know it's not part of this thing today, but we need to flag it up, surely, goodness, as a responsible authority.
Councillor Geddes.
Well, I think with respect to Andy, Chairman, we've already been shown the way to do that, and at least I've, and it's gone back to Councillor Driver's earlier comments. Mr. Sutty has made it perfectly clear that it would not be competent in his view, and I'll accept his advice, that we endeavour to deal with this by the imposition of a planning committee. As Archie has already said, the Gretna Regeneration Group are looking at this. Surely it would be possible for this committee to write formally to the Regeneration Group, point out that this issue has been considered at length today. We cannot deal with it by way of a condition, but ask them and urge them to deal with it and to address it, as it were, at the first opportunity. And let me say for the record, sir, if it were to develop into a meaningful visitor attraction and the issue of car parking, has to be addressed, in principle, I have no objections to this authority looking at ways to help to defray and assist in meeting the cost of that, because it is, after all, it would be conferring economic benefit, hopefully significant economic benefit in a part of our region. Come on, let's get back to the concept of the region being open for business.
Mr. Sutty.
Funnily enough, I was just going to say a very, very similar thing. The purpose of this was, the intention of it was to be a landmark, as Councillor Maitland referred to. It's basically something that you look forward to seeing. You see it on the road, you can even see it from the rail. It wasn't the intention of this, as I understand it, to be a visitor attraction for people to scramble over. However, I do accept the note of concern from the committee, and I think that is perhaps the way around it, is to write to, as Councillor Driver suggested, to the Gretna Regeneration Group and ask them to look at taking this forward as a separate application. Because what's been submitted to us is really a landmark issue, not a visitor attraction per se.
Members happy with that? Okay. Paula.
Decision is to approve the application subject to the conditions set out in the report. Members note their concerns regarding park and access arrangement. The officers will send a letter to the applicant noting those concerns.
Okay. Thank you. Item 12 on the agenda is the use of the former quarry, and we'd better wait and retrieve the leader and Councillor Gilroy, please. Okay, Right, item 12, use of former quarry for outdoor paintballing centre, widening of existing access and formation of car parking area at Newton Farm, Gatelaw Bridge, Thornhill. Mr Robinson.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, this application is seeking planning permission to use land, which part of it was a former quarry, as an outdoor paintballing centre, and also to widen existing access and former car parking area. The site in question is located to the east of Thornhill and is situated to the south of Newton Farm, which can just be seen by a little small dot on the map within Gatelaw Bridge. And the application site covers quite a large area. And this slide just annotates a few features just to help you to identify the site. A particular thing to note is the access to the site is from the U480 unclassified road, which is annotated at the bottom of the map. This plan shows the existing access arrangements, which at the moment is an informal access track to the road. And this is the proposed plan showing the access and parking arrangements, which briefly would involve widening the access and forming a total of 18 car parking spaces, which is actually split between 4 spaces which are reserved for the Craig Hope walkers and 14 spaces which would be for the recreational facility. You will have seen in the report of handling that a number of road names have been referred to, and this slide is just to highlight these road names just to make it easier to identify the site. Go back and look at that if you need to. The following slides show a number of photographs of the site and the surrounding locality, particularly the local road network. This slide shows the access to the site, which is on the left-hand side, and you can see the site from the road. Upon entering the site, the area proposed for the 14 car parking spaces would be accessed through this gate opening. And this photograph is looking back at where the 4 car parking spaces would be proposed. This is the area proposed for the 14 car parking spaces, which would be at the foot of the embankment, and the actual paintballing area would be at the top there. And this would be accessed via this informal path, which would be resurfaced. The area proposed for the paintballing is a large area of woodland. No details have been submitted indicating whether any structures would be required with this facility. But of information, those trees aren't actually protected by a tree preservation order. In terms of access to the site, this is a photo of the road and the informal access, and the road that serves the site is a single rural road in width for a distance of about 1.2 miles from Gatelaw Bridge to a property to the south entitled Closeburn Mill. In terms of visibility from the access, that's the visibility to the north, and that would be the visibility to the south. In terms of approaching the site from the north, there's a number of blind bends in the road where visibility is restricted, such as in this photograph. As you would come around that bend, you would approach the entrance to the site, which is actually in the middle of the bend that's coming up on that photograph. And from the south is a similar scenario. Again, the road has bends in it where you approach the site. In terms of the wider area of the road network, this is taken from near Gatelaw Bridge, and just to give you an indication of the width of the road, this photograph shows a car and an informal parking space on the right-hand side. A similar scenario to the south of the site as well, again with an informal passing place on the right-hand side, and that's just a close-up of the current informal passing places along that road network. So, in conclusion, this proposal would bring a new business enterprise, and the report of handling clearly identifies the economic, tourist and recreational benefits that this proposal would bring, which is strongly encouraged by Council as well as Scottish Government policy. In this instance, however, taking into account the Roads Officer's concerns and evidence gathered from the site visit, it's considered that this site is poorly accessed by a local road network that's severely restricted by single-track rural roads that have insufficient passing places, which would also make growing this business enterprise problematic. Whilst it's recognised that the proposal would generate around 6 to 12 cars a day, which is relatively low, and that new business enterprises such as this should be encouraged. The restricted nature of the local road network cannot be overlooked, and in this instance, it's the opinions of officers. The proposal would have a material impact on the local road network, and it's not capable of supporting this activity, and therefore it's recommended for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Could you go back to the map, please, of the roads? Get there something. There you no. Ah, yes, that one. Right. And the site, the entrance would be down here up from the north or from the south?
The access would actually be from the what's annotated the U48N road, and it's to the east of the site. So
Yeah.
it's about halfway between the sort of the junction at the Gatelaw Bridge and to the south where the road meets the unclassified 481 road.
I was meaning where would you come off a real road like the A76?
Oh, right. You could come off there. There. Or at the main roundabout within Thornhill itself is probably the most likely access to the site.
Okay, members, any questions for Andrew? Councillor McKee.
Yes, on page 162, 1.4, bullet point 1, 2, 3, 4. MDA would be looking to employ a local workforce of 2 people who would live on site. Is there a cave there, or have you any idea where they've got to stay?
I remind Councillor McKee that this is being recorded.
It's what the papers say. Where's he got to stay? The next application will be for a house.
It was the cave bit I was thinking. Sorry. With the officer gate.
No details have been submitted as to how any employees would live on the site.
Councillor Maitland.
Have we got any idea how many cars use this road now?
We haven't had specific numbers. It's from evidence of going on the site visit, it is actually relatively low. There's actually no developments along the site, but the advice that we've had from the Council's roads officer is they would not be supportive of any development along that road. They're very concerned about the restricted nature of it, and in that case is why they have recommended refusal on those grounds of the restricted nature. But to answer the question, we don't actually have specific numbers. No traffic count, for example, has been submitted to demonstrate that.
Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks, Chair. Seeing around for a previous life, Cricket Lynn's there on the right-hand side, that's a tourist attraction where the waterfall is, just under the U480N. And you go straight up that road there, it takes you up the top, which is access road, one access road to Queensbury. So there is significant number of traffic on that road, but that's not the only way. And the best way in memory was in through Campbell, probably the shortest road, given the majority of people won't be coming from Thornhill, I would suggest, but be coming from a bigger urban area, i.e. Dumfries. So suggest the traffic coming in the Gatelaw Bridge, that wee road, scepticism there, but we would never know, would we? But that road has traditionally been bad for traffic. Quite a number of quite right. But we're without any indication of what the usage is. Bad driving is causing the accidents on the road. And then that's a subjective rather than objective.
Yeah. Are there any buses that use this road? School buses or anything like that?
I wouldn't have thought so, Councillor. No details of before us, but it would seem unlikely.
Councillor Geddes.
If memory serves me correctly, in the immediately preceding item, I think someone said that talking about perhaps taking people out in a minibus, you know, that was the landmark monument. Is there no possibility, in fact, of doing something similar here? You could have picked people up from a collecting point, because, you know, I know we're not yet in debate, Chairman, but I am profoundly disappointed with the whole thrust and slant of this report. This is about our region being open for business. Forgive me for, you know, for making a comment, you know, before we're in debate, but my question is there any possibility of up collecting people, as it were, from a point and taking them there, bearing in mind that this facility will be provided at prescribed times during the course of the day?
That would be an ideal scenario in lots of ways. I think our concern as officers would be how we would enforce such a situation. But no details have been submitted from the applicant as part of a plan to do that. It could be encouraged, but I think we would have problems as officers as how we would enforce that over a long period of time.
Yeah, I was just asking Mr. Sutty to put it into the condition, and he said, well, how can you stop people from just turning up? Problem. Councillor Ferguson.
Chair, I'll leave it to the session.
Any further questions for the officer? Councillor Ogilvie.
I was going to ask if that was a recent landslide that we saw on one of the photographs. And it's not, I've been serious, that looked like it was quite fresh sandstone that was exposed. If you know sandstone, it goes dark after a while, and that was quite bright. So obviously that area is a bit...
It is a quarry. It is a quarry. Well, he's just about to give us an epistle here.
This is actually a photograph of the site taken about 3 years ago, or about 2.5 years ago, which did show the expose of form there. Whether it has sort of kept coming off the rock, we're unsure, but it does appear to have been like that for a period of time.
Councillor Gilroy, was it you? Somebody else. Councillor Ferguson. Oh, sorry. Councillor Hislop, please. If I could first.
Are we fighting over, are we?
It was just a question. Was there any, maybe missed it in here, but is there any notion that we could actually put passing places into as part of a condition to actually allow them to go and use that road?
One of the reasons for the delay in this application was roads would have been very happy to support the proposal if passing places had been put in, but it would have meant a cost to the applicant, and it would have run into several £1,000s for them to create passing places along the road, and it's land out with of their ownership as well, which would cause an issue. So we couldn't condition it as such because they don't own that particular land, and they would have to agree to it. And this is a small business enterprise, which we would always be looking to support, but the location really does make that problematic. And the small business enterprise means that it probably wouldn't be viable for them to actually pay for that.
Ferguson.
Just some advice to you, Chair, Mr. Sutton and his team. I'm a bit at a loss here. Is the planning application to allow people to paintball, or is it for the formation of the car park?
Well, basically, it is both. It's for the use of the land and for the development to actually form the car park. So the single application includes both.
Thanks, David.
Councillor Geddes.
Going back to the point I made earlier, sir, Mr. Sutton's saying, well, what would it be to stop people just turning up? Would it be possible, in planning terms, to condition it to the extent that people would only be able to participate on the basis of prior booking? And if that were a sustainable condition, surely as an adjunct or a follow-on, bolt-on, call it what you will, to prior booking, could they not then be picked up, as I say, from some form of central point, for what you better term? You'll obviously get the drift of my view in relation to this application.
I think it goes back to a similar point. We could condition a prior booking system, but it would still involve either cars driving to the site or whether the applicant hasn't actually provided any details as to whether they would be capable of doing that or would be willing to do that.
Councillor Gayris.
Well, I hesitate to introduce a procedural question at this stage in the process, sir, but, you know, rather than seeing this perhaps being refused today, would it be possible to defer consideration of this to get clarification of these points?
Procedurally, obviously, that's not an issue. You'll notice that it is not exactly the freshest and most recent of applications. I seemed, yes, very generous of you to do so. I recall from back in the day when this was first discussed that was the very issue that was being looked at, was the possibility of pre-booking and minibuses. So that rings a bell, but I think Andrew's inherited it since, but I think there were some issues with that being not looked on favourably, I understand, by the applicants, or at least there were going to be difficulties, logistical difficulties in trying to condition it. But don't know if anybody else can shed any light that's happened in between. It's a number of years ago since I was first involved.
I look forward to this. while he gets his memory back.
Thank you, Chair. You may all gather that I'm the previous case officer in question before this got unloaded onto Andrew, who's taken it on manfully since then. My recollection during this application, it was subject to pre-application discussions with Mark Buchanan and Turnbull. Yes, it was always agreed that the idea was good. It's a small business venture, fairly in sympathy, if you like, with its surroundings. I'm quite satisfied the intention was always to manage it at quite high standard. The applicants have a background in this kind of activity. They're very much outdoor enthusiasts, so no concerns about that. Where it really hit the buffers was with regard to the local road network and the nervousness about the volume of traffic that could reasonably be anticipated as being attracted to this venture, notwithstanding the size of the car parking. There were various ideas as to how you could run minibuses, you could book in vehicles, have certain times for visitors and so on, and they were prepared to venture things like that. The perennial difficulty with it was how you actually monitored that. In other words, it wasn't possible to do that, and yes, they were willing, but realistically, if the site was sold on to a different operator, how would you enforce that? And it was felt that it would really meet the sixth test. There was an ongoing dialogue between both myself and the relevant roads officers, and also I understand the applicant's agent and the relevant roads officers. And the trail went cold for some time, but an impasse was reached because the roads officers were nervous about the potential implications of traffic generation in terms of volume and type onto a very restricted road network. And yes, they felt that a potential solution was to provide passing places, but as well as the cost which Andrew mentioned. The concern was that achievable, because you would be looking at land out with the present public road boundary, and therefore you would be involving land within the control of others, and would that be reasonable to put that burden on the applicant, quite aside from the cost considerations. So there have been various options looked at, but the concern with this has always been how enforceable would the condition be if you're managing traffic in a particular way, and we wouldn't want to build up false expectations with the members of the public in that regard if we felt we really couldn't monitor it adequately and therefore fulfil the terms of the condition.
Councillor McCaughey.
I mean, if you go back to 1.5, it tells you in there that this has been delayed for a long time because of discussions between the applicant and the roads officers. That's obviously going nowhere. That's why with this recommendation to refuse. And I don't see any point that's trying to labour the point. If our officers and the applicant can't come to some agreement, we certainly can't do anything.
Councillor Maitland.
I was going to ask the officers whether it was at all possible. I mean, we're talking about 24 vehicle movements per day. And it's not that it's on a tiny amount of road, it's actually on quite an extended part of road. You wouldn't expect everybody to back up at one point, if you see what I mean. People would be going on a staggered basis, and that will be a maximum number. I mean, I find myself wanting to help this one along as well, and I think that everybody does, but we can see that there is a problem. Is it possible on a suck-it-and-see basis to offer a temporary permission for a couple of years, say, maximum? Because although it is a risk, obviously, to a business, that's not our problem. If the applicant wishes to take a risk, having been given a temporary permission, that's up to them. And actually, looking at it, the outlay in terms of capital outlay is not colossal.
On that point, Councillor, if you refer to paragraph in 2.1 and subparagraph L, that was a scenario that was actually looked at and taken to the roads officers by officers, and to see whether they would still have any objection to that. And that was something that the officers were quite keen to explore, but we didn't get any support from the roads officer on that point. But there's certainly nothing to go against that.
Councillor Ferguson.
Just referring to the first two bullet points on page 163, you know, whilst I sort of hinted that I thought most people would come from the south, in actual fact, there is an alternative route with 20 passing places from Turnhill through that back road. And on top of that, the second bullet point is it would look as though the applicants are actually going to be providing parking space for what potentially could be a council requirement, i.e. visitors to a national monument. Because I think Cricket Blynn's got a specific interest in terms of historic interest, if I remember correctly. So should we not be providing something? Because historically, it's a nightmare trying to find someplace to park there if you want to go up to where the Covenanters used to practice their religion.
Again, that's the development would have obviously wider objectives, you know, as well as that. Yes, definitely.
Councillor Geddes.
Chairman, earlier on today, there was an issue raised. I think it perhaps might have been one of the adjournments about possibility of such as a landscape architect, you know, having been present at this meeting to answer detailed questioning in relation to an earlier application. I wonder, in fact, if we could not say the same with equal force, maybe even more force, in relation to this. It seems to me that we're relying to a tremendous extent on the attitude of roads officers, and it would be good, in fact, for these roads officers to have been here and to have been questioned direct by us as elected members. Apart from anything else, it would maybe perhaps have got the message across that we are keen to see Dumfries and Galloway open for business, and we expect, without compromising anyone's professional integrity or judgment, we're keen to see all reasonable efforts made to assist in achieving that objective.
Thankfully, I can provide you with some good news in that regard. Basically, Steve Rogers and myself have been meeting with senior roads officials from DG First with a view to actually having we're calling a single roads development hub, which will be based actually in Militia House within one of the P&E buildings. And it's likely to be somebody called Keith Brown who will be the intermediary, and Keith would be willing and able to come along to future meetings to answer it. Not that one, no, indeed.
That was the man with the salt, wasn't it? Can I have Councillor Tuckfield, please?
Thank you, Chair. I have a great deal of sympathy with this applicant. I have to make a point that every day I travel 7 miles on a road which is not fit for purpose. There are no passing places on it, and it is an extremely busy route. And to my knowledge, there's been very few accidents on that road. I'm a bit concerned that there isn't a road person here to sort of be able to discuss this as well. So I agree with Councillor Geddes' point.
Councillor Ogilvie.
I've visited other business outlets, more so that way, towards Kirkcudbright and that. I don't know if I should mention them, but Cream of Galloway and Brighouse Bay, if you ever go there, I mean, you know, the small plastic places, yet they generate, I would assume, more traffic. I mean, I've been to took my grandkids and that to Wind and Galloway one day, and there was school trips and everything, and that's a single track road. You know, so we've got a precedent already set where, I know they're more historic, and we've got to put things in the present day context, but it's worked elsewhere.
Councillor Geddes, please.
Would it be possible, standing in the back of what Councillor Ogley has just said, would it be possible to defer consideration of this and to ask, in fact, the appropriate roads officer or officers to come along, and let's endeavour to explore direct with them, you know, possible ways of overcoming this? I think, you know, it's obvious, sir, that the overwhelming majority of opinion, if not unanimous opinion, in here today is, you know, a desire to see this come to fruition. And I'm not endeavouring to do, you know, council officials' jobs for them, but at the end of the day, I think that, you know, I would rather hear it direct from roads officials themselves, rather than the greatest deference having it relayed through to me by the planning officer, albeit I have every, you know, faith in the planning officer's ability, you know, to get the points across.
I mean, one of the things we can defer for is a site visit and ask for roads officer to actually be on the site. So can we actually, as a part of a process, defer this application so we can have a site visit, have roads officers on the site, and that way we can travel up that road to see what it's actually like as well.
Aye. I mean, we have put in a condition in the past. We had an application up recently for Carrochtree Visitor Centre, new visitor centre, in a condition not about road passing places, and they've been installed, and that was not land that was owned by the applicant.
Obviously, there's no problem about a number of the options that you've mentioned there. You can obviously defer it for a site visit. You can defer it for bringing a roads officer to the meeting to explain things. The one position I wouldn't like to get into is bringing a roads officer along, try and at the committee meeting try and negotiate a solution. And that clearly isn't really an appropriate use of committee time. It is an old application. It was, I think, ultimately out of frustration that we brought it to committee to try and bring things to a head. And it's an interesting debate to hear. There is no movement from the roads officers. They are objecting to this. I would suggest that really you have three options. You either defer it for a visit and go and see it for yourselves and see if it is really as bad as is set out. You could decide to determine it today by going with a recommendation, and then the applicant can go away and try and come back with a negotiated settlement. Or the other option is that you can actually approve it today. If you're going to do so, then you have before you the idea of a temporary permission, which has been mooted. It is a risk to the applicant to do that, because they would then have to carry out the engineering operations, which would be at cost for only a temporary period. But it certainly is one option which is before you.
Councillor Geddes.
I would think Councillor Driver, no, for the first time today, has shown us the way forward. You know, let's defer it for a site. Yes, you know, but let's defer it. Let's defer it for a site visit and ask the relevant roads official or officials to be present on that site visit.
Councillor Ogilvie.
Just to be awkward. No. David said quite clearly that the road officers have said and they can't get any movement. So we bring the road officer up to Thornhill and he says, look, I've asked this, that, and no, it's not going to happen. You know, do we determine it today and then that forces the hand of the applicant? Or do we just string it on and get the same answer? Because the road officers, if David's right, aren't prepared to move, then we're back to square one again. So it's just my worry if we're going to prolong this unnecessarily. But if we make a decision today, then it's up to the applicant then to compromise or whatever.
Councillor McComb, did you want to come in?
Thanks, Chair. How difficult would it be to put in place a 20-mile-per-hour speed limit in this section of road?
No.
As they used to say in Chewing the Fat, Gunny no do that.
Councillor Driver.
All right, Burnley, we'll be fine. I think maybe answering the question that Councillor Ogilvie says, unless we see the roads officers, we can't ask them the questions. Until we see the whites of people's eyes, and that's the best way I get the answers from. So actually having a site visit with the roads officers there, having, at least you can ask the question of the roads officers, what sort of discussions have you had with the applicant, and then from there make your decision that way.
So, there's a proposal for a site visit, is that correct? Right. If you come to the offices, I'm sure somebody will give you a lift so you don't get lost, Ronnie. Oh, hey, Paula.
Decision is to defer consideration of the application for a site visit and to request the presence of the roads officer on that site visit. And the applicant.
Chair, given the difficulty some of us have getting pool cars, is there any chance the officer could arrange for pool cars for us to get there? Thank you. Or a minibus, that'd be even better.
Aye. Could we have less hilarity here and a bit more forward going, please?
I wasn't joking about the
No,
transport.
we'll leave that to officers to arrange.
Thanks
See if
very
we
much,
can get
sir.
a minibus.
Thank you.
Okay. Do you wish a break for 5 minutes at this point? Right. It is 15:03, 10 past. You've got 7 minutes. You need a comfort break. Technology has caught up with us. Right. Item 13, change of use of detached residential annex to form a separate dwelling house at Waterhead Cottage, Dumfries. Claire Eckstein.
Thank you, Chair. The application relates to a residential annex associated with Waterhead, which sits to the north of the A75, some 400 metres northwest of the Lochfoot roundabout, which is just off the U232, which goes to Terregles. It's an aerial photograph of the site, which shows the annex between the public road to the west and Waterhead, which is the property on the southern part of the picture. Access would remain as shared off the public road. This shows the residential annex and the garden, which is hatched in pink. And this is the annex, which is a single-storey building, which was converted to an annex in 2003, a residential annex in 2003. It was subsequently extended in 2008 with the two hipped roof wing extensions onto the rear. These are the photographs of the site. This is Waterhead, the existing house. And just panning left from the previous photograph, you can see the Waterhead and the annex, and the distance between that gable end and the annex is approximately 4 metres. And then panning left again, previous photograph, and then this is looking at the timber shed and the side of the residential annex. And immediately to the left of the photograph is the shared access onto the public road. This is taken from within the yard area, looking at the front of the annex with Waterhead on the left-hand side, and then panning to the right and got the annex on the left with the stable building on the right-hand side, which doesn't form part of the application. This is looking through the gap, which is that 4 metre gap I spoke about before, with the residential annex to the right, and that's taken from within the rear yard area. Panning left again, which shows the rear of Waterhead, and then panning left again, showing the yard area and another outbuild. So this is the actual rear of the annex itself. Timber shed on the right-hand side, and you can just see the gable end of Waterhead. And panning left from the previous photograph, this is looking back up towards, so that's the rear of the stable block, the annex, and then panning right. So the proposal is for change of use of the existing residential annex to a separate dwelling house, and no further alterations are noted. The main issues are set out in the committee report, but as noted in the reports and the photograph, the annex building is of modern construction and is of no traditional architectural merit, which would be a requirement for it to be supported under Housing in the Countryside Policy, Structure Plan Policy 4. The use as a separate dwelling house is also considered to be contrary to General Policy 1, in that the close proximity of two separate dwelling houses would create an unacceptable degree of overlooking and loss of residential amenity for the existing and proposed residents of the dwelling house. And it's for these reasons that the application has been recommended for refusal.
Thank you, Claire. Any questions for Claire on her presentation? No? Okay, we're in session. Councillor Dryburgh.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just looking through the report, and it's quite straightforward, and I think I would recommend the go ahead with the recommendation on the report as is.
Councillor Geddes.
I would support that, sir. If it's a formal motion, I would second it.
Anyone otherwise minded? No? Okay.
The decision is to refuse the application on the grounds set out in the report.
Thank you, Paula. Item 14 is the erection of storage building at Barnkirk Roads Depot, Newton Stewart. Mr. Murray.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for a storage building for road salt within the existing roads, Council Roads Depot at Barnkirk, Newton Stewart. That's the proposed site plan. It's set back well into the corner of the site. There are existing open storage bays to the north. It's a standard industrial portal framed building, walled ground to roof level on three sides and completely open on the fourth side for access. This is a view within the depot towards the site from the west. The shed would be beyond, in the corner beyond that yellow truck. This is another view from the north. It would be set back into that corner there. And that is an aerial view of the site. The proposed building would be in the extreme bottom right-hand corner of the yard, as seen in that view. No issues arise. In policy terms, the recommendation is to approve.
Any questions, members? Councillor Ogilvie.
Just a point of clarification. Judging by what we saw there, the building would abut against the trees. The trees would remain as sort of screening. Yeah.
Councillor Geddes. Sorry?
It's for debate.
Yeah, well, I think we're in session now. There's only Councillor Geddes.
Can I move we approve it, sir? On the basis detail.
Yeah. Agreed, everyone?
Sorry?
Thank you. Paula.
The decision is to approve the application subject to the conditions set out in the report.
The hour of the day can focus the mind. Right. Item 15. Consultation by South Lanarkshire Council regarding a planning permission in principle for cooperative sustainable settlement, including housing, mixed commercial uses, industry, leisure and community uses and associated landscaping at Owenstown, land east of the A70, south of the A73, north of the B7055 by Rigside. Mr. Jinks.
Thank you. This is a consultation by South Lanarkshire Council as a neighbouring authority. The proposal is for a major application located approximately 25 miles north of Moffat, 38 miles north of Dumfries. This site itself is within an area of forestry located approximately 7 miles south of Lanark. The application proposes a large-scale mixed-use development covering an area of approximately 760 hectares There's been, that's the application site there. So the indicative master plan shows a mix of uses, including 3,200 homes, office, retail, financial and professional, industrial areas, hotels, and leisure and community uses. And that's the phasing plan. These are some viewpoints showing the development in the white area on the right-hand side of the photograph. In terms of our view, there's not considered to be any implications which would affect Dumfries and Galloway to a material degree. The impact on the local development plan spatial strategy is not considered to be material in light of the significant distances from the region's main settlements. As I said, you're looking at 38 miles from Dumfries and 25 miles from Moffat. In all other respects, such as landscape and environmental impacts, development would have minimal impact in the Dumfries and Galloway region. And the M74 issues in regards to this road would be dealt with by Transport Scotland throughout the application. So in light of these elements, we've recommended no objections to that.
Any questions for the officer? We're in debate, we're in session. Archie?
Wouldn't it be great if we had it in Dumfries and Galloway rather than up in South Lanark? And I've got no issues with this particular case, and I agree with the recommendations of the report.
Councillor Geddes.
I certainly agree with that, but a bit more specific, sir. I was thinking, would it not just be wonderful in a mid-Galloway context? Never mind Dumfries and Galloway.
I think somewhere between Newton Stewart and Glenluce would be ideal. Side A75, a main trunk road, everything would be going for it. No other thoughts on it, so recommendations raise no objections. Happy with that? Okay. Paul?
Decision is to raise no objections to the consultation by South Lanarkshire Council.
Thank you, David. Next application, application 16. Request for delegated authority to take direct action under section 135 of the Town and Country Planning Scotland Act 1997 as amended, and Regulation 26 of the Town and Country Planning Control of Advertisements Scotland Regulations 1984 in respect of execution and cost of works following non-compliance with the requirements of planning and advertisement enforcement notices at Starfish Express 3 Dashwood Square, Newton Stewart. Mr. Murray.
Yes, thanks again, Chairman. I won't reiterate the heading to the application as you have in full, but clearly this is a request for delegation to carry out works under direct action powers in the Act where there has been non-compliance with planning and enforcement notices. I'll take you through the images of the property. That's the location of the property on the northern side of Dashwood Square in Newton Stewart. This is a view that we managed to access of the property prior to its alteration. So that was a view of Dashwood Square sometime in 2007. The property in question is the one just on the corner there. Central door, shop window on the right with another door and a single window to the left. The next slide should be, this is the frontage post-alteration with the unauthorised illuminated signage with brown UPVC windows, loss of the door to the right, sills raised, fenestration of the windows altered. This is a view of the corner showing the additional unauthorised illuminated signage on the gable as well as on the frontage. And this is a more distant view across the square, simply included for comparison with the more traditional unaltered shop front in the property to the right, which would be a much more appropriate style and design for retail premises within a conservation area. Again, that's just a more distant view from a different angle. This is the design that has been agreed for the works that we are asking for approval to carry out. It's back to a more traditional style, single pane, shop type windows, a central door. One of the good things is that the traditional columns and pediment to the door has been retained, so that was a historic characteristic of the building, so that has been retained. So this is a request for approval to carry out direct action. I would just make a couple of comments at this stage for members, because this is not a very common request that we make to you. I would draw your attention to paragraph 2.3, and you will note that the recipients of a notice are not entitled to dispute the validity of this action. So having gone through due process in terms of service of enforcement notices, both of which were appealed, both appeals were dismissed and the enforcement notices upheld in full by the reporter, with the only minor change being period for compliance. The developer has made no effort since that time, no realistic effort since that time, to comply with the terms of the enforcement notice. In those circumstances, the council has two prongs that they can use in terms of powers. We can make a report to the Procurator Fiscal because an offence has been committed. Let's be very clear about that. An offence has been committed now. That's the only stage in planning terms where an offence is committed in this context. Non-compliance with the enforcement notices is an offence. The second power that the council has is direct action powers, whereby the council can move onto the land, take the steps required by the enforcement notices, and reclaim all costs incurred in doing so from the owner of the property, including any administrative costs that the council incurs. I would strongly emphasise at this stage, however, that the resolution to this matter and the remedy to these breaches of planning and advertisement control remains firmly with the landowner, even at this very late stage. I would suggest that that power remains in his hands until the point when the council moves onto the land to carry out the works. And indeed, I've been in this situation before, and that time it was removal of vehicles from the land, and literally at 11 o'clock on the night before we moved in, the vehicles were moved. So I'm emphasising that quite strongly, partly for the benefit of the landowner, who I see is here today, that it remains open to him to resolve this matter, and every opportunity has been given to him to do this, but to date, unfortunately, has not taken up these opportunities. So in conclusion, I would reiterate that we are seeking your agreement to delegate power to the area planning manager, carry out the works required by the enforcement notices. Indicative costs are included in the report. Those costs would be reclaimed from the landowner if the council were to complete these works.
Councillor Geddes.
Are we in debate, sir?
There are no questions. Is this a question, Ted? Okay, I'll give you that first.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Murray, if we go along with the recommendation today, when would you propose to actually carry out the work?
I wouldn't be able to identify a date at this stage. Clearly, that would be partly when contractors were available to carry out the works. Clearly, we would seek to coordinate this with the landowner. But I think given the time that's passed, we would be seeking to do it sooner rather than later. In other words, I don't think we should countenance any further unnecessary delay. However long it took to organise it, as soon as we could organise it, I think we should carry out the work.
Mr. Duncan.
Chair, just to pick up on that, obviously the recommendation is to delegate authority to me to implement the direct action that Billy's mentioned, and Billy's dealt with this case in some detail over a number of years. Just to reiterate what Billy said, we're seeing this as, if you're minded to go with the recommendation today, to see this as the start of the process. We wouldn't wish to defer that any longer. The situation has been going on for a number of years now, and really I would be looking to try and expedite this matter as soon as we possibly could.
There are no further questions. Councillor Geddes. Sorry, is that a question?
You said that there's a cost, obviously, if you have to go ahead.
realistically, the recouping of that, those costs, have a timeline for that, or how do you do that?
I think the council would simply implement normal recovery procedures if the landowner refused to pay the accounts that were submitted to him. So I couldn't give any kind of timeline on that. I would understand it would take as long as it took.
Councillor, there's no further questions. I'll go to Councillor Geddes, who wants in, we're in debate.
Thanks very much, Chairman. Well, let me say, first of all, that I derive no satisfaction from the Council, be it as Planning Authority, being in this position. Having made the point, I would pay tribute to Billy Murray for the efforts which he has made to bring this to an acceptable and a satisfactory resolution. That this has not been possible, as far as I'm concerned, is due in no way to him. And I have no compunction, sir, albeit with a certain degree of regret, I have no compunction in moving, in fact, that we grant the delegated authority which is being sought today, and I would hope that these works will in fact be implemented and put in hand with the due degree of expediency, standing at the length of time that this matter has been outstanding, and I would move accordingly.
I'd be willing to second that, simply because local councillor, and I know that it's all catalogued in there, the process we've been through. So, is there any amendment, Councillor Dryburgh?
There's no amendments, or just certainly to support that recommendation. I've got to back what Alistair says, that we don't like to be put in these positions. We are a quasi-legal committee, and planning applications come forward with, legal implications and conditions applied to them. This would probably serve as a reminder to some developers that we do take our duties, very seriously in this particular case. And I would hope that the developer has a chance to still work with the council to get these in place before anything's actually taken down legally, and I hope that is the case. So I'd certainly go along with what's been said.
Okay. Anyone otherwise minded? No, Paula? No, sir. Sorry, you can't speak.
Decision is to approve the recommendation and delegate authority to the Area Planning Manager to implement direct action under Section 135 of the Town and Country Planning Scotland Act 1997 and Regulation 26 of the Town and Country Planning Control of Advertisement Scotland Regulations 1984.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I have no further business. Thank you for your attendance.